Yes.
How heated you getting? Give me a minute. I don't
Make
have.
sure the AC is on.
All right, well, welcome everybody out to the Western River County Planning Commission work session on May 6th. Looks like, I think we only have one item on our agenda tonight, right? And that is for the Bennet Farms project, review of the master development. Is there more than that, or is it just review of the master development agreement tonight, right?
Yeah, well, we've got the land use table as well.
Okay.
We'll be looking at.
Okay. How many cows can I milk over there now?
You're down to 1.5.
1.5. All right. Okay. Charlie, whenever you're ready, if you wanna preface or.
Put more food in my mouth.
Or whatever.
While he's chewing that chair, can I make a quick comment,
No.
please? Charlie, appreciate you sending out the updated copy. That original one, I just wanted to clarify, it wasn't really a complaint, it was a little bit of confusion, or overwhelmment maybe.
Yeah.
I like, and I think I speak for everybody else in this, I like being part of or seeing the whole process and seeing that, but the other part was just a little bit confusing because it felt like I had to have the little orphan Annie secret decoder pin to
Right.
find out any bit more Ovaltine, you know? And so that was the only problem. I don't want you to feel like, oh, they don't want to be included in things, because I'd rather you send us more and us say that's too much than not see it.
And that's the gauge that I would like to use as well. If you guys say, well, too much, then help balance it out. Normally, what we've been doing until we started doing all this, and you probably hear me as a broken record here, is you guys don't even have to do any of this stuff. This stuff all happens behind the scenes. But because of the way state code is now, we are doing what we're doing. It'd be nice if we could try and get that stuff taken care of behind the scenes, but, and I wanted to make sure it was clear, cause I had some conversations with Andrew and wanted to make sure it was clear what I had presented in the meeting was intended to kind of give you guys a status of where we are, not necessarily intended for you guys to go through and actually do the editing. So thank you for not doing the editing, and thank you for expressing that concern, because I would have felt bad if you had done that, especially if we changed it all the next day.
There's a method to the madness,
Right,
so to speak.
right.
And it's not necessarily that we have to have it, because like Charlie said, we don't have to have the voting names. But it is a good gauge of how the project is progressing, especially with the comments that are over on the side.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
And some of it's my commentary and some of it, it was late in the evening when I was getting it, so I probably didn't filter myself as much as I could have, but it gives you guys a good understanding of where we are, where the applicant is. In some places where the applicant was versus where their attorney is, kind of in a different spot. And to be fair to their attorney, I would probably be doing the same thing he's doing. There's a standard of practice in the state of Utah based on case law that development agreements kind of go a certain way, and the best development agreement out there just gets copied over and over and over again. You just put somebody else's name on it and a different address. And so a lot of attorneys are looking at this from a very narrow, specific perspective, not looking at this as, hey, why don't we multiply your development rights by 6? You're not gonna multiply your profit by 6. Let's try and get you to 2 to 5. Let's get you to 50% or, whatever, but the point is that the community gets a really good investment, despite the fact that we don't want to grow, we don't want to not be ag anymore, but we also don't want to make anyone be ag, and we also want to grow smart. And we have all these diverging interests. The worst thing we could do is, in my opinion, entitle a whole bunch of development and not provide a path for it to be least impactful to the people who live there now. So that really is what my comments are about. Talking with Jeff a little bit before the meeting, they've got kind of a summary sheet to go through the areas of the development agreement that they see as land use regulation oriented. We didn't compare notes beforehand, so what you see highlighted in gray from me might be a little bit different than what Jeff is showing you, but for the most part, we'll get through all the stuff that Jeff wants to get through and see if we're all okay, and then go around the table and see if you guys have any more concerns. If not, we'll turn over to the land use table after that. Yeah, please.
Come on. Probably on dinner. We just,
Great. You wanna sit next to me, huh?
I don't know, so we just created, like Charlie said, a kind of a summary of the development agreement, like the terms. And then we reference sections in the development agreement. Liam and Charlie, if you guys see something that we need to touch on, in addition to this, just let us know. And this is my stab at trying to put some organization to this and make it easier for you guys.
You on?
Thank you.
No.
What does the secret code at the bottom let us?
What's that?
I said, what does the secret code at the bottom let us? It's not quite enough numbers to be your credit card number.
No, it's my social security number.
One extra.
We're missing the last. I know.
7-5. Okay. 165. Okay. 312. 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
That's
That's
great. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
5 and 4.
I made you go. Well, I should pay the spot for you. It's fine. And then.
William just, didn't give you much time to look at it. but
Recording in
anything off the
progress.
top of Your mind. Your, if not, we can go through it. You guys okay if we just start at the top and kind of go in on, we can reference the development agreement?
So maybe high level, just to keep the discussion flowing, we thought we would pick. The 10 or I don't know how many things there are on here that have come up during conversations and things like that. And then we referenced where it's at in the development agreement with the zone. So that if you wanted to get into like the nitty gritty detail, you would know the exact section to go to. But each of these just summarize the term and kind of where you can find it.
And then Geneva, you'll share some things.
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, so first one, zoning. And Charlie, you might need to help, you understand a couple things here, but basically we're creating the TNZ zone. Before we do that, we're zoning the property to form base.
So, I think that's what Craig is the name of their attorney. I think that's what Craig was suggesting we move towards. Some of his notes are a little bit cryptic, so I'm not entirely certain that's what he was saying, but I do think he was saying, look, let's do a FB rezone. And then right after that, flip the switch to the TNZ so that we know the former zone isn't the A2 zone, it's the FB zone, meaning the property stays entitled with form-based entitlements if the agreement goes
So
away.
yeah, that was the reversion that you guys wanted was form based, so he thought just taking it to that. And then rezoning to TNZ, if TNZ goes away, it's already form based.
Any concerns with that or questions?
Is that what you guys want? Is that what you prefer?
I think that's the direction
Because that's what I've gotten out of Craig's comments too, form based.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if that was our initiative or if they proposed that originally.
It was, we started talking about it. It's a response to the question about what happens if the development agreement goes away for whatever reason. Do we want it to just go back to the A2 zone? And we know that, we're not super keen on things developing out the way the A2 zone does. It's probably better at a higher zone. And we already have a zone that does do a lot of this management that we're trying to get done through this development agreement. So the idea was, let's throw that at it. And see where we go after that. I think even in the form-based zone, depending on each unique development, there's gonna be a request for minor modifications anyway.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is that revision clause, then it's not reverting back to the prior zone where we don't. The TNZ isn't a zone, right?
Right.
I like that approach a heck of a lot better than
Starting over again.
sending it back to A2 and then you're looking at compatibilities of at least the entire area is gonna. Not, it can still build out in a way that's uniform.
You're there? All right, the only question I have with, Charlie, you've added open space zone as part of it. I read the open space ordinance, I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense where it would apply.
just along the 100-foot river strip. There will need to be some exceptions to some of the rules.
And with the development, because there's some exceptions in the use table in the TNZ.
Yes,
So with that,
yeah, so we'll want to specify where those areas are gonna
okay,
be.
all right.
And that's, one of my comments was, it's a little too open-ended, and conditional uses, are a little more. They're hard to deny, and so applying new standards to them. The way it's written, you can get a whole bunch of conditional use permits all along that river corridor, so I just wanted to
Well, let's
address
go through,
that.
when we get in the use table, you know, we can pull it up and we'll just, there's a concern, we can
Yeah.
address it or delete it.
Awesome.
Okay, all right, zoning, we're good, term. 30 years with automatic renewals unless terminated by any party or terminated and complete the project, which I think is first.
So I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So given that the town architect's involved, like, I don't see this ever going away at build out. Cause what plays into this, so you build it all out and it's all done. So does that mean the town architect goes away and everything changes? My concern is to keep the uniformity of what you're wanting to do there. If that's not involved for the life of this, anytime someone wants to come in for a remodel or say a house burns down, who's gonna look that it goes back to the standards that are tied to this?
Yeah.
So the planner and
The HOA would come into play, because there'll be a very robust HOA that'll have
So the
CCNRs.
CCNRs would cover the design standards and all that, okay,
And they would have an approval process for that type of stuff.
okay.
I would expect over the next 30 years, you're gonna see a number of code changes anyway. And so if that actually becomes a realistic outcome prior to the development agreement expiring, that the county should take the initiative to create the TNZ permanent and figure out how to deal with the fact that the development agreement's gonna expire.
Okay.
And I think between now and then, if we have enough staff and resources, we should work on proving up our version of the TNZ so that other developers can use it and just can default to that if we want to.
Anything else on term? Okay. Uses, so if we can open Geneva, the use table we sent, so.
And Charlie has
Oh.
copies as well, it looks like.
So you guys were sent a copy on Friday, we changed some of those and we
Take one down. pass
we
it around.
enlarged them and bolded them, just so we can talk to what I think.
How do all those memorized?
I know. Well, and we can talk to
Detailed
kind of
notes.
the thoughts and you guys let us know.
As long as we ain't got a dang dairy farm in the middle of it, you're probably good.
So until we find something else, yes.
This revised concept came out of a sidebar that Charlie and I were having last week, thinking about breaking uses out into transect zones. And you can see the more dense and style uses in the more dense areas, and then it fades out, those go away, and so there's a lot more. Permitted uses. I think last time you guys talked about how everything was just a beat.
Yeah.
And that was broad stroking it, but now that we've broken it out in all the transect zones, you can see like. There's a lot more. Like
So I'll just describe the transect zones. So T2 is mostly, and we call the map, but mostly kind of rural open space. It's the slough. Lance, you're gonna like our latest concept, the horseshoe is mostly green, T2. But we have some things that we're interested in putting in those areas. Since, you know, we have them, we also have an open space requirement, so we want some flexibility in what we do there. But most of it's not gonna be high dense or some use we don't want. So that's the transect map.
So north is that way.
what does the
This
right
way.
hand of the screen mean?
So T2 is gonna be. This. T2 is this color, it's light green, and then also in the horseshoe.
I do these.
Okay. T3 is this light color. That's the neighborhood edge, it's gonna be less dense. T4, the neighborhood general zone. And then the most, like the highest intensity of T5, which is the neighborhood center zone.
That's gonna be where like.
What was 4?
4 is neighborhood general zone, so it's, you're kind of bridging, you know, the T5 and the T3 is basically. how it is. And then SD1 is auto auto-centric kind of commercial areas, we put that on 4,700.
So like vehicle oriented commercial.
Vehicle oriented commercial. And then we put this SD2, I mean, our intent, and we changed where the farm was located per the landowner's request, that's where it's been, and wants to keep it there, and so we kept it here. But we also have some flexibility that if that doesn't work out, we put some uses in, that we can change that, so.
Is that Green Acres? Is that what that is right now?
Yeah.
So SD2 is what?
Is the farm.
Is the farm.
SD is special district, I think so.
So if you guys saw any of my initial comments, one of my concerns was SD could be anything allowed in the T5 or agriculture. I think this is the response to that, breaking it out so that SD is a very specific special district versus the vehicle oriented being the other specific special district.
And then the Weaver corridor is this dark green. The reason there's a difference in kind of size is because of where the property line is relative to the high water mark of the Weaver River. And so we just put a note in here that the river corridor is that 100 feet of the ordinary high water mark of the Weaver River.
So the property line isn't the middle of the river,
In some areas it's not.
doesn't call to that, wow, okay.
That's why there's a bit of so.
Okay.
Anyway.
It's obviously not like survey level, it's rough.
Yeah, it's a concept. The concept is.
Okay.
Cool. So I don't know what the best way to kind of cross off the use, if we want to just go through it. Line by line, what do you think is most efficient? Check the use table off.
I can get with you, Charlie, for our, when we updated it.
I think line by line works. You just go to the line and ask if there's any issues.
Okay, accessory building. And then everywhere but the forward. Nope. Accessory dwelling unit, a living unit, accessory to the primary dwelling unit. Not available in T2 or the corridor, but everywhere else.
Why do you not want it in T2 if those are your more rural lots?
Well, T2 is mostly. But we changed it to allow some single family in T2 in case we wanted to put something, so I think we would probably want to permit that.
And I think we would probably prefer that as well.
Yeah, I would like to see it permitted there.
And just so everyone knows, the
We changed that.
Oh, yeah, and I'm taking notes here.
accessory dwelling units, looking at the project to the south of here. Accessory dwelling units aren't intended to count against that.
Yeah, it's
density.
not your density down, but
Okay, accessory use, permitted everywhere but Weaver corridor, agricultural hobby farm. Everywhere but the vehicle oriented commercial and the Weaver corridor.
I think on accessory use, you're gonna want permitted in the Weaver corridor.
Okay, you wanna change that?
Incidental to the main use, and the main use being it's the trail corridor or the park corridor.
Family food production. As an accessory use of single family dwelling, I would say T2, that should be in T2 as well.
I agree.
Okay, you change that?
So let me make sure I understand. So T2 has kind of evolved a little bit more towards the traditional T2. And if we had a T1, the implied T1 is like completely natural.
Yeah. Home occupation, and accessory with residential use.
Permitted for T2.
Yep, put that permitted. Okay. Parking lot, we have it everywhere, but the corridor, accessory to a main use. I don't know, we also have, I felt like we had, parking lot somewhere else. But we may want to come back. I don't know if you want the parking lot to be in the corridor.
Parking lot is somewhere else as main use of property. So this parking lot is, as long as it's accessory on the same site as whatever the main use is. The other parking lot you're thinking of is if the parking lot
Oh, right,
is
okay,
just.
okay.
Just a parking lot.
So this is, and N is appropriate on this.
Because then you're.
Produce stand everywhere. We also thought it might be fun to have that as in the corridor on the trail. As a conditional use, but again, I'm not sure how to. Your thoughts there.
So my only thought on that is do we want that permitted everywhere without having some conditions on it?
Yeah, the question is, what is a produce stand? So
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to definition.
if we have standards on produce stand,
Well-
that's a different story,
I
but
guess it answers it right there.
because it's
From
accessory.
produce grown on premises only. So that means they can have a garden in their backyard and sell it in their front yard.
Yeah.
The
So,
intention of that is to keep it accessory.
I like that.
Temporary building or use. Permitted everywhere, conditional, we record it. Okay. Agriculture and open space uses. Agriculture is a use of the property, permitted in T2 and T3, not permitted in the higher. And stuff, permitted on the farm and not permitted in the corridor.
Maybe the corridor.
You want it in the corridor?
Is that all just gonna remain just open native?
I think the intention is to improve it for park purposes. So the 100 foot wide, I think we've agreed that most of that will go to the park district.
So one question on that, in the interim, it's being farmed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You know, we're not,
Any change we make here doesn't,
It's just moving
if it's
forward.
already established, then they can stay non-conforming. If he abandons farming on any one of his fields for the period of greater than a year, then that would actually be abandonment. He wouldn't be able to restart. However, I don't think any of us have a clock. We're not winding that up saying, whoop, 1 year.
yeah.
Let's just sit there and watch it.
Yeah. Okay, wildlife sanctuary, it's permitted everywhere but vehicle oriented.
Hang on agriculture. I think we want to put some parameters on both T2 and T3. Cause your largest lot size in T2, what do you think that could turn out to be? Generally, I mean, maybe you have like an estate and that's a different story, but just from a general perspective on your map in the T2 zone.
I mean, they're not huge lots.
Like
Well,
less
T-
than half
If you
acre.
look at T2 where it's going, it's the slough area and then the little mountain on the river.
Can we pull that map? up again?
T2 is actually pretty small.
For them. For them.
Right there, so the green, the light green, the T2 is actually pretty small.
Okay,
So like if for, this basically is if you traded some of the open space, we didn't need as much for, you know, Army Corps of Engineers for wetlands or whatever. And so we put in some residential units and then we moved open space somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what this is contemplated.
okay, so we're not expecting agriculture in this context. The configuration is probably gonna be the self-limiter, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to say no manure cannons, we don't need to say no dairy farms or anything like that.
So we're internally, when we get into the town architects would have to approve all the uses that then we approve.
Including agriculture, okay.
Okay, wildlife sanctuary, everywhere but vehicle oriented, and then conditional on the Weaver corridor, I'm guessing permitted on the Weaver corridor? Or do you want that?
I have a question, what are we, defining that as? Is that just an area for natural wildlife that are already there, or is this for somebody to come in and rescue wildlife?
Oh, good question. So I think we'd probably equate this to the Ogden Wildlife Sanctuary down on 12th Street. The nature, thank you, Nature Center.
Okay.
But doesn't mean that it can't be conservation
Are
either.
you wondering about that kind of case?
No, I'm worried about another one that we had that caused a big mess and a big problem that I don't see in this.
Okay,
Hmm.
what? So is there any changes we need to make?
No, if that's the intent of what Charlie explained,
wanna-
I think it fits it fine.
Do you wanna keep conditional on the Weaver corridor?
That, I'm just marking those. It's a good question because we want to make sure we kind of hammer out what is going to the park district.
So conditional probably just keeps it. So we do hammer it out if we want to do it.
Well, conditional doesn't work that way anymore. It used to work that
Yeah.
way.
It's an
So-
approved use subject to certain conditions.
Yeah, maybe it's an SP, special permit or something like that.
Okay,
I'm just making it up on the fly, but
that's fine. I mean, we're not, it's not like we're thinking and we're creating, you know, we're actually. I don't know what situation we bring this in, but I don't know what's gonna happen on the corridor, so.
To me, it seems like that would be the most appropriate place for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So do you wanna do you wanna do an SP?
yeah, SP or something like that. And SP kind of means that this is when you do your open space plan. We'll flesh it out during that.
Okay, I'll do SP, right?
Mhm.
Okay, agritourism, permitted everywhere but vehicle oriented. And then also that, not permitted in the Weaver corridor. Any concerns here?
Are you sure? Well, never mind. Your architect's gonna take care of that.
Finish that thought, please.
I was just there, are you sure you want agritourism uses in, on small lots?
Yes, because I was thinking the same thing.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? Where's that even applicable here? I mean, you know, sorry, I don't mean to blow this up. But there's a lot of this stuff that once this is not a farm anymore. What are we talking about here? Anyway.
Can we do
Well,
this?
to that point, Andrew, I think part of it is the town architect's not gonna, I mean, there's a lot of discretion that he's not gonna allow, and so I agree with you. I think it was like, what are the things that don't seem that controversial, which is permanent, they may not even get in anyway.
Right.
But if there's something that feels controversial, just take it, like, we're not.
On the agritourism, what have you guys seen successful? Do you do like a minimum acreage or something?
So I was gonna suggest minimum acreage, yeah, so in our agritourism ordinance, I think we just changed it, the smallest you could do is 3 acres. However, there are very limited things you could do in agritourism, on 3 acres. So my suggestion would be wildlife sanctuary, agritourism, community oriented, well, actually, let's just wildlife sanctuary and agritourism. Probably need 5 acres or more.
John's put that in, minimum of 5 acres.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
And then at that point, does it even apply to this development?
Agritourism would, if we keep that little,
The SC2.
SC2 zone that would apply to, all right.
So
But I think
for
that limits it on all the other ones.
wildlife and agritourism, are those the only two?
For now.
For now, okay.
Okay, agriculture and community oriented crop production operation for the use by the broader public, which is a community garden rental road operation and take it operation.
I think that's good, I like it.
You could see that on an acre or smaller.
Yeah. What about conditional? SB?
Yeah, or maybe it's TBD.
Maybe,
Or no.
how about my suggestion is anything that's conditional on the Weaver corridor, we just change to SP.
Okay,
That's kind of my thought, yeah.
Especially if,
that's fine.
I feel more
Okay.
comfortable with that.
We'll alter that.
Essentially, it requires legislative authority to approve whatever that special permit is. Until after the open space corridor plan is put together.
Okay.
Well, I'll make a note, make sure the development agreement says that.
Fruit and vegetable storage and packing plant or produce on premise.
I think that limits itself. With the premise. Or
Alright, spade, animal breeds and pasturing, or any animal for the purpose of grazing and animal density, can exceed the land's ability to function to the basis of grazing the normal flowing season. From the considered T3.
I think your description limits that, so I think that's.
And then on the agriculture. Apiary, same thing, I don't know why do you have bees, but maybe. There's essentially bees.
I really want it not allowed in the corridor, the animal grazing. Seems like that would be. We're talking about trails and stuff, I mean.
In the Weaver
Yeah,
corridor?
but if it's going into the parks, I don't know if we want fences and gates and animals and.
If you go mountain biking on it's this island out here. in
Antelope.
Antelope Island, you can mountain bike with a bison. Careful how close you get.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily grazing, that's wildlife.
I'm pointing that out as a potential complication. I don't know
I'm
if we
just
want to
thinking,
be.
because if we're using that, which they are, using goats and other things to maintain. That area, if the parks are wanting to do that, it should be allowed, right? It's
And-
not too much.
In my eyes, if the Parks District's bringing it in for a maintenance tool,
It's different.
Different.
it's different than you turning out a herd of goats on the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, we could just put SP.
I would also be concerned about any impact that could have on the river corridor
That's a
to
good
get
point,
over grazing.
Right,
Because that's
yeah.
holding things in
Yeah,
place.
so special permit.
And what I'm seeing on that river corridor is a nice round bank. And from one end of this development to the other, with a nice strap that you can see water from. And I don't see a place really for where animals along there. So,
Just keep it in.
Mine would be in.
Alright, amphitheater. We have that everywhere. Including on the Weaver corridor. I don't know if you want an SP there as well.
That one,
That's part of the.
So because that's a big difference, but I liked what you showed us from before, from the other development.
Well, I like the amphitheater idea on it.
I think we should allow that as a permitted use. The question is who owns it? If it's the park district owns it, does it matter? If the HOA owns it, does it matter?
I don't think it matters in ownership,
As
as long
long
as
as,
it's not a private owner, you know, like a private
Exclusive.
or commercial
Right.
type ownership in it.
yeah, I would agree. So, I think this could be fleshed out when the, open space master plan is done. Identifying which portions of that, river area will be owned by the park district, which will probably be the majority of it versus which will be held back by the HOA or privately owned, although always open for public.
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah, it could be open to it could be privately owned as long as the public has access to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, entertainment facility, indoor entertainment facility everywhere but the corridor. Entertainment facility outdoor, everywhere, thought also. On the report would be interesting.
Let's, pause,
Special permit.
pause for just a second on both of those.
Okay.
In the design code, so something that the architect will be looking at. There is the provision for some, light community oriented commercial to happen like at intersections on corner lots and stuff like that. Kind of like you see here in the Ogden area. And so when we see entertainment facility indoor, and it's permitted in areas that are gonna be primarily residential. It's very unlikely for it to go in your block. It's more likely for it to be right out there in the corner, like a nickel cade, or is that even a thing anymore? Nickel
I
cade?
wish it was.
Quarter
That used to be fun.
The idea is that like families can walk to something.
Now it's gonna be a Trader Joe's.
Are you okay with SP on the entertainment facility outdoor in the corner? I'll change that, you know.
Yeah, SP on that.
Amusement park, temporary. Put that everywhere, from an event standpoint.
Kind of went back up a little bit. Entertainment facility outdoor, I think I'd prefer that to be conditional use across the board. Cause we're gonna wanna address, I mean, I know you guys are gonna wanna do your best to take care of your community, but if you put an entertainment facility right next to one of the other neighbors who definitely doesn't want to hear the noise, we're gonna wanna address noise, traffic impact, all that kind of stuff, through a CUP. Same with music.
Filled sport oriented, okay. These are big, I'm guessing they're.
So you're saying entertainment outdoor, you want conditional on all?
Okay.
But leave special permit we recorder, or you want that conditional too?
Nah, special permit on that one.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Amusement park temporary. Concerns on that?
Feels like we're there now.
No longer, no longer than 1 month.
Campgrounds or picnic areas.
I think that one's gonna be limited by your town architect anyways.
One reason why our form-based code has that in there is, in the resort areas, we could see maybe some potential in some of those more residential areas. For a 3 acre lot or a 5 acre lot to turn it into a campground. You may wanna do, so you don't get shantytown, you may wanna do a minimum acreage on that. Now, I know Mike's not gonna allow shantytown, but,
Minimum 3 acres.
minimum 3.
Does that work? That's what it's up in the upper valley.
What about corridor?
Special permit.
Okay, SP, do you know? All right, private park, playground, recreation area, non-commercial, we have that everywhere but the corridor. Public park, everywhere.
What?
Mhm.
Special permit across the board.
They're not allowed.
This one. Curious your thoughts, but, short-term lodging facilities, like a B and B. You want no on the corridor?
If this is like,
You're not gonna be able to build a structure to have a B and B on the corridor, so I think it's a no.
Okay. Cause before and there's some other conditional on, like, there could be a restaurant right on the river.
Which I'm okay with that,
Okay, all right.
but not to put a bed and breakfast right on the river. You can build it outside of the 100-foot setback, and
All right, put N on that, you know.
is bed and breakfast, is that not in the residential section, transient lodging?
Okay.
Oh, and it's listed as not permitted, okay.
Swimming pool, private everywhere but vehicle oriented in the corridor. trails everywhere.
I think it'd be okay to have a private swimming pool in the vehicle oriented. Any concerns with that?
Well, if you had, I mean, say you had a building go in and a hotel, yeah.
Animal groomery, small animal. Grooming for small animals.
I was gonna say, why don't you allow that in a T two?
Corridor. Dog and cat facility.
We got plenty of those out there that just happen naturally. So if anybody's looking for kittens, I got a whole herd.
Ew.
Keep in mind, dog and cat breeding, beauty parlor, kennels, lodging, all that kind of stuff. There are some potential noise implications, and there is nothing worse than a barking dog next door. There's ways to fix that. Off the record, we'll talk later. As far as that one goes, I'm gonna just put an asterisk next to it. We might wanna look a little deeper on that.
We're okay, I mean. It's not like we're looking to put it.
We're gonna care a lot about that too, so we were happy to put some brackets.
You're not gonna care, is that what you're being sarcastic?
Yeah, we're gonna care way more about noise.
Oh, I see.
Maybe you put an acreage requirement on
Okay, what do you think?
Minimum 2 acres.
2 acres.
Okay.
Well, what is our, right now you have to have a special permit for a kennel license, right, for more than
Conditional use
dogs or
permit.
something.
Yeah, and in certain zones, you do have to have a minimum
lodging
acreage.
in a pretty small facility if it's like 1 or 2 dogs, but
Hmm.
if you come in for it could just be conditional and then you subject it to.
Well, I think Casey's got a great point there, cause if you go, what's the kennel license, over 4?
I think it's over 3, isn't it? I don't know, I don't have that many, but
I
how
think
many
you-
cats do you have, Charlie? Just kidding, you're not.
You want to be more?
I've got 2, but if you talk to my partner, we can have 15.
Well, I know somewhere.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm thinking like somebody that's like breeding all the time, which is becoming popular. in others.
Puppy mills.
Yeah, but I want to restrict the Andrew that wants his Pomeranian to breed with the neighbor's poodle. Not that Andrew really has a Pomeranian, I don't know.
I think our dog and cat facilities, we should strike beauty parlor, because I think that's built into the one above.
I agree.
Okay.
They barbecue up really nice.
God.
Charlie's got 2.
Yeah, I changed it.
Any other changes on this one, Charlie?
No, I think,
Are we leaving the acreage?
minimum, what do we say, 2 acres,
2
3 acres,
Okay.
2?
On the smaller stuff, like if you're just overnighting a dog for somebody, would that count as lodging?
It's a good question.
Are you doing it as a business?
Well, I just remember there's a gal that came into Far West Planning Commission one time and she was like babysitting 2 dogs and she had to go in for a conditional use permit.
Some things you just keep out.
The whole point of zoning codes is to stop the worst offenders. If you're not offending anyone, there's no
If
reason.
it becomes a problem, that's when it comes into play.
I see what you're saying. So let's reconsider the acreage. Maybe we're putting some parameters on how many animals, based on
Can we
the.
just do it conditional?
Is it conditional?
Yeah,
Conditional would actually work
and
really
then
well.
leave conditional across or
Until-
leave T
until the
two?
corridor.
Okay,
No, T2 as well, yeah.
Horse or equestrian event center.
and then remove the acreage.
You're gonna be limited on your lot size with that.
Yeah.
I know, but what is, again, this might be another stupid case of question, but is this gonna prevent the parks from having a horse trail on the corridor if we have them
It's an
in?
event center.
This would be more like
Oh, just in
Arena
case,
of some kind.
to always have, yeah, even that though,
Including indoor concessions.
if we're wanting all those trails to connect at some point, I think that the parks is planning on putting one somewhat close.
No,
to
but
there.
SP on the corridor.
I think so personally, but.
SP,
Good solution.
Horse or equestrian training facility and stabling.
same problem.
SP on the corridor.
No, I think it's not permitted because that's a commercial use. The parks is never gonna do it for a commercial use.
Stable for horses, non-commercial?
You're limited. I mean, I think you gotta put a minimum 1 acre at least on it.
So we do allow in our half acre lots, we do allow up to 2 horses on half an acre, but you're supplemental feeding, if not a full feeding on that.
And you're full.
Right, and it's a mud bog. Now, that's supposed to be half an acre devoted to the horses, but nobody follows that. The horses are always stuck in a corner somewhere. My question is when somebody goes out and buys a horse and puts it in their 2,000 square foot backyard, how does the architect govern that?
Minimum 1 acre and it's done.
Okay,
Okay.
should we say that across the board
Do you want
for
to?
horses?
I would just put that in the definition, it's just like we've done on the others.
Yeah, do you want it in the commercial one as well?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a horse
You're never gonna
equestrian,
build an equestrian, an arena is an acre.
Yeah,
You're gonna build an arena.
so an event center, a training facility and non-commercial stable,
mhm.
at least an acre.
And do you
And
want,
the event center, is that what you're saying too? Okay.
do you think there would be ever stables for horses on the quarter? Probably not, probably not, okay. Stray animal shelter.
You know what, let's put special permit on that.
For which one, the
Yeah,
commercial?
Or
Whatever,
stable
yeah.
for
I don't-
Non-commercial?
I don't want Lance to have to come in and have to change the code if they ever do wanna do some kind of a.
Just non-commercial, leaving commercial, okay.
Stray animal shelter.
I think those need to be conditional all
Or
the
just
way
do
across.
conditional across the board. Vet facility.
Non-permitted in the corridor though,
Not permitted in the
okay,
corridor. I think veterinarian facility is gonna be the same as a stray, any of the animals, I think that's gonna be
Additional.
conditional as well.
If we put standards on vet facility, that might be different. The small mom and pop corner veterinarian, a little bit different than.
Dogs and cats.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Birch Creek or Ogden Animal Hospitals, either of them, they're pretty low key.
But you're worried about dogs barking and everything else that you're worried about up there in a facility,
Yeah,
I think that stays the same.
Okay.
Unless you're just gonna sedate them all and they won't bark all night.
make them go to the bathroom inside.
Okay.
Okay.
Man, this is my favorite thing to do, and I gotta go.
Well, the next one is gonna affect you and me. Can't take our skill down, man.
Okay, alcohol beverage production.
That stinks.
This is wholesaling. This isn't retail.
This does the production, manufacturing, brewing and wholesale.
The wholesale,
I guess,
what you-
and
oh,
wholesale.
and wholesale, yeah, that's.
Intention is to be
No home brewers.
wholesaling.
You can home brew for yourself, you just can't, and you can share, you just can't sell it.
Well, if
You
you,
give it away.
if you have the bottling factory back on the other page, that might be all right.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem.
Any concerns on that one?
No,
Okay, bakery, delicatessen, catering, large. Any concerns there? Bakery, small. Butcher or other custom meat products, large.
I think you gotta put something on there that just, they can cut it, they just can't kill.
Okay, gonna put that on there.
Yeah. How do you want me to say that? Just,
no slaughtering.
No slaughtering, because they can bring in the hanging and cut it up, and I think that's great.
I think it says kind of that now, but you can make it explicit.
it says where it's cut, prepared, cured, smoked, or wrapped for sale on site.
So just make it explicit that it can't be slaughtered.
Yeah, I just said no slaughtering.
You guys put the laughter in slaughter.
And I think that same thing will apply to your small one too.
Oh, yeah, I can add that.
Yeah, next page.
Okay. Eating and drinking establishments, bar.
I love how he made the P extra big.
So you guys got a copy on Friday and the big Ps are what we changed between then and today. Okay, that's all. Let's do.
Oh, I thought you were. just-
We love brewery or Splitter's restaurant, which the only thing here is we're not doing drive ups in T2. You all here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, retail and drug sales. The only thing here is, drugstore and pharmacy, not in T2, grocery store, not in T2. And then we put produce stand commercial. in the corridor, I don't know. Since produce stand is, I don't know what your thoughts are there, SP or no?
Yeah,
In the corridor?
we do SP on that, especially if we're allowing some kind of agricultural production.
Cemetery, I wasn't sure on what's typical.
Can we back up before we get to that, Jeff?
Yeah.
Sorry. So if we're going back up to the eating and drinking establishments in the Weaver corridor, didn't we already say that we would like to see some kind of restaurant in those areas? On parts of it as a conditional?
Want a bunch of drunk people using the trail?
No, I'm thinking like even downtown Ogden, we have Ogden River and all that, and yeah. I'm
I think
okay
it's a
with
good
drunk
idea.
people using the
Yeah,
trail.
I think, I don't know how we missed that, cause I thought we had it in there.
So like, for me, you're gonna, I want it to be open for everybody, but I do like the fact that people can stop and grab something
Yeah.
and continue on down.
Do you want special permit on restaurants?
So I think,
Yeah,
like, what about a bar and a restaurant,
Yeah, let's SP all of it,
everything but the drive up
It
window?
needs considered.
everything but drive up, yet not SP, not permitted.
Okay.
Thanks, Casey, we'll catch that. Okay, cemetery. What do you see typically? I don't know. Is this okay?
Usually large lots. I think this is gonna be self-regulating.
Okay, right. Rest homes. I guess maybe just, yeah. Childcare, civic, fire station, government offices, instructional facility, medical facility. I think we're gonna self-govern a lot of this stuff, but.
Although you might need a medical facility on the corridor next to the bar.
Yeah.
And a daycare center.
Museum. Or art gallery. I don't know why we change, I think we should permit that in the vehicle oriented.
Yeah. Agreed.
Which one?
Maybe museum or art gallery.
Oh,
And could you see any art in the corridor? You know, not
Like
a
outdoor
building, but just, yeah, outdoor
like
art.
metal art type stuff.
Maybe it's like a temporary stand or something for a festival or something.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think for the most part, that'll fall under accessory use, though, accessory to the, park or accessory to whatever the open space nature is. But I mean, we could if you, so that, what we're looking at here is primarily what's the main use of the property, and if we want to make sure that we carve a space for art, installations as the main use, then yeah, we'll definitely want to have that on there.
I mean, there could be a historically important. I don't know.
There's a lot of cool outdoor art.
Should we
Mhm.
just do SP on that, on the corridor?
Sure.
Post office, preschool, public library. Public park. You want that to be permitted in corridor?
Yeah, but
Okay. Be on the
Good
corridor,
question.
public or private recreation or community center.
I don't know that the corridor necessarily needs to have a no, not permitted there, maybe a special permit there.
Okay.
For public or private recreation? Not the, okay.
Can we put that into two categories?
Yeah, so why don't you split public rec center, rec and community versus private rec and community, and put,
Anything in the
So
corridor
just
should be
copy, yeah,
public.
I think
Yeah.
copy and paste. And we'll do private and public. Okay, right. Public storage facilities. Used by a government entity. Maybe have a SP on the corridor.
You know, what you guys have this in your form base, do you know what's, this like a big thing?
the county owns some.
I'm just thinking about like the pavilion with the maiden shed. Would that count as that? or is
So
that-
the pavilion with a maintenance shed on a park would be an accessory use. This is more anticipating, the county, salt, storage and stuff like that.
Will you do me a huge favor? On the public schools one, will you put a big N, like you did the Ps, all across this whole thing and send it to Sarah? Just to mess with that.
Take a picture and text it to her.
How'd you do
Yeah, I'm not even gonna touch the keys.
Just for fun, she know who put you
that? Storage still used by, okay, we're good there. Okay, visitor center. Again, we did condition on the corridor. I don't know if you want SP or no on that.
Yeah, I think anything should be SP if it's not, if it's allowed, it should be SP in corridor.
Okay, worship, facility, we did it everywhere but the corridor.
Where I worship.
USP.
You need a
Hey,
building?
you
No, I don't need a building.
gotta get a permit. for that.
Okay, agency for real estate travel.
Yeah.
A lot of these are office uses, we have them permitted everywhere but T2 and Weaver corridor. Okay, residential uses. Single family everywhere but the Weaver corridor. Basically, we limited in T2, we have no other dwelling available except for single family. And,
Sorry, say that one more time.
so the only permitted dwelling in T2 is single family.
Okay,
We added this section 6 family, I talked to Mike's team. There was concern of multifamily in T4. I think it was, or T3. So we limited it to 6. And then struck it out in multifamily dwelling.
is the 4 on the second line, is that typo?
Yeah, wait, there's a couple typos.
Okay, so that should be 6 as well.
And we need to fix the one in multifamily, same with 6.
So one of the challenges in our code is we define 1, 2, 3, and 4 and multi. We don't define 6 families.
So the reason that I added 6, and you tell me if it's, I mean, we're not gonna permit it. Based on the design code, but there was a concern that. We just didn't want, people thinking that T3 can build a
Multifamily.
multi-family.
Oh, gotcha.
So we're trying to create a bridge, basically.
Okay, so we've got a couple of ways we could do this. We've got single
We don't,
family.
this is sort of self-regulating, I don't think we can delete the 6-plex thing. And just know that in our design code.
You'll take care of
it'll
it.
take care of itself.
Okay, we've got single family attached, that's like one building that has a bunch of, it's a row home complex or something like that. And so there are other ways that we could address this without doing 6 family.
So just delete 6 family in Geneva. And then do permitted in T3, I think that's the only concerns, there could be a 6-plex in T3.
So,
T3, permanently says and on T3.
Yep.
so this one, you mean
Oh, yeah.
T2? Oh, this one, okay.
So they were concerned that putting a P here would make it look like there's gonna be multifamily everywhere.
Yeah.
So should this definition really say no more than 4 dwelling units?
That's good, we're good.
Oh, okay, okay.
And then no big multifamily on the farm person. Or normal.
I'm sorry to do this, but I'm having, I think that we already. Sorry, to say it, I'm having second thoughts on the bar after Charlie's statement has finally got my gears turning. I like everything else other than the bar, I think on the Weaver corridor.
Okay,
Okay, those do know.
Restaurant that
I
serves
mean, it could be
alcohol.
close enough to the trail, but it keeps it away from the trail.
Yeah, I guess-
It's a valid point. It's like-
Did they change, there was a change in the state law a little while ago where they had to label themselves as a restaurant or a bar?
They changed it back because they realized that they
They
were getting a
changed it
lot
back?
worldwide attention on how dumb that is. But they still have some of those limitations still.
I was just thinking about restaurants that serve alcohol, some of them had a label as a bar, even though.
Yeah, or a special club or whatever. it is.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't think
But if that's fixed, then I think.
But like, the way this is written as far as a bar where they only serve alcohol, it's not fair then.
yeah, we don't, yeah.
I mean, I think you can have a restaurant that is 21 or older.
Yeah,
That's very agree.
So you look at the
Okay.
second item there, you got brewery or distillery with a restaurant. So that's anticipating that you're gonna be producing.
River Brewery.
Yep, exactly. On restaurant by itself, we actually went through and eliminated the segregation of alcohol consumption in restaurants. So Applebee's, that kind of stuff. There's alcohol served there. Follow state law, have a restaurant is why we eliminated that.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, so bar is not in the corridor.
If everybody else is comfortable with that, just a thought, so.
I agree, we're okay with that.
Mhm.
Jumping down to multifamily, I'm just thinking in the farm. It should be permitted because I think it's next to T5. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I'm still on bar.
I messed up.
Do we want to go back to the accessory use section and insert bar accessory to a restaurant? Or eating establishment of some sort? Cause sometimes you've got the over 21 only on the inside of a restaurant. I actually don't know if you can do that here in Utah, but
Yeah, that's
If they ever
what
leave.
that new rooster's down by the
Yeah.
Coliseum is.
okay.
Yeah, you know how I found out? If I get in there, they're like, no.
Did they ask me
You're
for an
saying
ID?
adding an accessory use for a restaurant?
No, in the accessory uses, add a line for bar that is accessory and incidental to a restaurant.
Like a whole new section.
Just a whole, no, yeah, whole new row.
So in the top page,
It just clarifies that you can. Like,
So-
bar can exist as long as it's inside of a restaurant.
restaurant, okay.
And they could only serve certain kinds of alcohol, only Moscow mules.
That's the way to your heart, Charlie? Oh, now I know a secret.
That's my default.
Hey, it's good to know.
That's my after planning commission.
It's something stronger than that,
On the residential page, I don't know why, I just think everything in between T2 and corridor should be permitted. And the design code is self-governing, that's stuff, that makes sense.
Resi.
Residential. Sorry,
I don't know why we don't want disabled people on the special district 2, which is the farm,
If the farm
if
doesn't.
the farm doesn't. That makes sense.
special district 2, okay.
So he's got a couple of ends on special district
And
two.
I don't know why, I don't know why, I think we were thinking if it's state agritourism, but if it goes away. It's next to T5.
So you won't be able to prohibit this in the T2. You'll need to have this as a permitted
Okay,
use.
so Geneva C,
So-
on the residential facility for both.
It's there, any residential that covers ADA protection.
So elderly, disabled and trouble.
Yep.
Okay,
So both of
As long as
these,
it's
so
residential.
those two, and then on the other side of T2,
Treatment facilities are a little bit of a different story.
1 up to Geneva.
one up, this one?
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Short-term rental. Yeah, permitted with the- Transient lodging, again, permitted with the corridor. Concerns with that? Workforce housing. We didn't have it in T2, is this another? Do we permit it in T2?
Workforce, I think you should.
Okay, permitted, should be really workforce housing.
Sorry, let's go back to short-term rentals.
Yeah.
In the past, planning commission has been pretty adamant that short-term rentals aren't allowed in Western Weaver. Now, maybe this is a unique situation for a unique development, so worth the conversation.
Is it overnight? Is that what that is?
Yeah, short-term is, nightly rentals. Now, our current county code says short-term rentals, you can't have a contract for less than 2 overnights. So if somebody's caught renting it out, single night, flipping it, they'd be out of compliance. County's got some really strict regulations on short-term rentals, mostly because the Ogden Valley, that's.
Yeah.
50% of the houses up there are that. We haven't had as much of that issue out west yet, but. I don't know, any concerns? Short-term rentals can undermine affordability. Cause some of those buildings that you would otherwise rent out long-term. Become that short-term because it's cash crop.
Right, hey Jeff, does the HOA in these T and Ds restrict that?
A lot of
The
them do.
ordinance stuff?
A lot of them do.
The short term?
Well, that create the sense of community, and if you're doing nightly rentals,
Yeah.
you're not really building that. I can't remember, but that, part of it might be something, but if you did a minimum night thing.
Yeah, so a couple of developers who have special development agreements in the Ogden Valley, they've agreed to 3 overnights instead of 2 overnights, so it's even further restricting how often they can turn the house over. Now, to be fair, I don't think their contract with their renter needs to be 3 overnights. It could be 1 overnight, but they can't turn over that rental for 3 days until the next one comes in.
I think it
Some
comes
space
out.
for two.
Short-term rental should go along with where we're at in our code right now, and Western Weaver does not allow short-term rental.
What if it was, in conjunction with a commercial building? So if it was, second story and above kind of stuff, would you rather see those
Or an
reserved?
ADU,
Say it again.
or like an ADU.
Yeah, or an ADU. So there's another consideration that we debated in the Ogden Valley is as long as the owner is on the property, it's owner occupied, then they can rent out the other building. And we didn't say which one. We said it could be the primary dwelling or it could be the ADU. They just have to be on property. So if they want to go live in the ADU and rent out the house, they could do that. Now, that didn't get passed in the Ogden Valley, but that's one way to, I think, help reduce impacts. It is also a policing problem.
Yeah, you want this headache in your development.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what it boils down to.
we have to approve the use as well. I think it's to Charlie's point, what are the special circumstances that it makes sense? We would probably approve that, but I don't know. Something like this is a big, I mean, we don't want,
This isn't your objective.
yeah.
It's your secret objective.
Yeah, this is not what we're trying to solve for, so I don't know if we self-regulate it, if it's conditional,
What if it's not permitted in T2 and T3,
okay.
Just have it more, the more dense zones.
T4, T5 and special district?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, and not the SD. Agritourism does have the ability to have, they're not called short-term rentals, it is,
It's like a little motel, hotel.
yeah, overnight stays. It has to be tied to the agritourism experience.
Okay.
So short-term rental, you wouldn't even need that there.
But in your higher density, you're more apt to get someone buying that specifically for overnight rental purposes.
Yep. Yep.
So. Yeah, what did
That's
everybody
what St.
think?
George is, right? Everybody lining for that.
It's a good question. Should we just say not permitted?
I'd say so. I saw a bunch of party hounds in there.
Okay. If at some point in the future you've got
There's a reason to
specific
do it.
challenges, yeah, then it'd just be, I mean, be a
You can
special
also
permit
go
kind of
look
thing.
at like Norton and others and see how they adjusted.
Okay.
To see, I remember them saying that they rated that pretty heavily.
And could we do special permit instead, maybe, or condition?
Well, so
Conditional?
special permit, just by nature of being a legislative action, everything could be special permit,
Okay.
right? So it's
So what about
almost as if it
conditional,
would be a
maybe?
addendum to the agreement.
Just put in no, and put a
Okay.
star, and we can, if there's some compelling reason why we should put something in. we could pull it.
What does bed and breakfast fall under? Like, do you have a?
Transient.
It's transient,
Yep, that's the next one down.
okay.
Oh, that's a question for me then. I was thinking it was something different. But I do have a question about,
Oh, you mean housing of transients?
yeah, that's, I didn't read the definition, I just, yeah, sorry. But not necessarily that one now, but like the troubled youth facility. And I don't know if we have a rehab facility in here somewhere we haven't got to yet or whatever, but just because in the recent years, those have been big controversial things, bringing them into neighborhoods, so rather than it just being permitted, especially in this fancy neighborhood, I think it should be SP.
There's a reason why it's been controversial. If it is a residence, a residential facility, anywhere that residential would be permitted for other people, has to be allowed for these folks. It doesn't mean like a commercial residential habilitation facility can go in a residential center. It's got to be their sleeping place. This is their house. And with reasonable accommodations. So if we had like, for example, parking limitations, no more than 2 spaces or whatever, but they've got staff that needs to park, then we would need to allow them to expand to have a little bit more than that.
That being said, all of these are appropriately marked.
Yeah, including, I put on my notes, I don't know if you caught this, Geneva, that even in the special district, if residential is allowed there, then we need to allow each of those.
Yeah, I think did you change that?
Which one are we on? Or are we not on transient? Oh, you're back. Okay, sorry.
Which I have had those as my neighbors and they were the best
Yeah.
neighbors I ever had.
It's
They're all
actually,
permitted.
And honestly, it was like.
So it needs to be in the,
Building and.
No, not corridor, you're good.
Okay, that's good,
Your
okay.
house, and that's it, right? Like
they're usually professionally managed. Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree.
Okay. Workforce housing, that's where we.
law, hold on.
Yeah, yeah.
There we go.
Sales without retail storefront, where we're at
Sales at retail stores.
with retail storefront.
Agricultural implement sales or service, everywhere with T2. General retail sales and nursery or commercial everywhere, but or everywhere with the corridor.
Is the sales with and without retail storefront, is that from our form base?
This is all from your business.
I say that's brilliant.
Vendor short term, vendor booths for vehicle, whatever, everywhere, but the corridor, we thought the corridor could be conditional in case, you know, you have a food truck on the trailer or something, but. You wanna put SP?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, let's do an SP on that. Short-term vendor. That could get out of control, fast.
Within the property.
Yeah, anywhere within the property, if it's not constrained, so food trucks, if. Food trucks are fine, they're usually pretty good at self-regulating, but you get someone who just sets up a tent out in the front yard. I've got a guy up near me who sometimes he gets stuff out of crashed semis and sets them up in his front yard and has a yard sale. But
We have to, the town architect would have to approve, any of these uses are by the way, they have to be approved by the town architect.
okay, as long as we're okay.
It's us.
So the question is, with a short-term vendor, given the short nature of them,
It would,
how do you catch them?
you probably, you wanna require a permit from the HOA or the, I mean, what do you guys do for short-term booths and stuff like that now? Do you try, do that to get a permit?
We usually don't allow them unless it's a more commercialized area. That's how we deal with that.
I mean, there's a lot of these places have pop-up events, they wanna generate a lot of energy.
So we've got,
Do it in conjunction with an event.
yeah, so we've got an event permit. It's actually not even a land use permit. You have to go through a completely different department to get an event permit or mass gathering permit. So any of those can fall under mass gathering. But if we're looking at someone just putting up their easy up and occupying the sidewalk, that could get problematic.
Still on the boondoggle.
I mean, I guess with us self-regulating this, what is do we add verbiage or?
It's just a question of policing. We have a hard enough time policing this. The question is can you police it? It's a lot easier if we just have not permitted, because then everybody's expectation is that is not allowed. It's almost like social influencing. But if it is permitted, it can be a lot harder to convince that guy to leave, and you won't have the counties enforce.
So if we want to have a food truck event, would this not allow us to?
If it is on public property, you can have food trucks.
On private property?
We don't actually regulate.
Oh.
But what do you think if it was on private property and someone did a food truck roundup?
I'd be concerned in residential areas.
Yeah,
Commercial, I'm not that concerned about, but residential.
But if you were gonna do a food truck thing and you were to call it an event or a mass gathering, you just get a special permit, you can do it. anyway.
Right. Could do it, and then you can do it along the streets.
Yeah,
Just have to have.
so it's allowed, it's just you gotta go pay a fee, I assume. and
What if-
register.
what if it's permitted in conjunction, so what if it's an accessory use, permitted in conjunction with
Something else.
a commercial operation on site? Or commercial or recreational operation on site?
You know, I have an issue with that.
You guys be okay with that?
So you're hosting a 5K or you're hosting something and you have food trucks.
So we'll go to the,
I think it's when we do it anyway, right? It's like you're gonna do it in conjunction with something else.
it's not the primary use of a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
There are several neighborhoods in Western Weaver County and West Haven that right now they do a community gathering just amongst their neighborhood and they rent a food truck together and everybody comes together. Or they have a food truck be there, they don't necessarily rent it. And it's a good gathering. I think that that inspires community and gives that sense of community. So I don't want to be
Agreed.
too over regulating on that. But again, maybe it's one of those things, it's like, well, we're all doing it, so nobody's gonna care or do anything, right?
Yeah, so this is kind of one of those rules where if it exceeds community expectations to the point that the government gets involved, then we have a threshold where we've got some
Okay.
teeth. So
Yeah.
we're not going out and arresting the ice cream man or
Right,
anything like
yeah,
that.
okay.
And usually a food truck, if there are some communities that have chosen to regulate food truck operations and where they can be even on public rights of way. But we don't govern that, so if you're in the street, with a food truck, that's your park.
We're not gonna govern if someone's to have a wedding in their backyard, it's a one-time thing. It's not gonna be.
Okay. It's only when somebody goes too far.
Right,
That's all this is all about.
That's my motto, don't be the reason the new rule is made.
Right, yeah.
That's a great.
Okay, we've
I don't follow.
basically allowed, services everywhere, T2. And the corridor, except for outdoor recreation guide base operation. I don't know if that is SP or you want to get rid of that.
I know.
We're gonna be whitewater rafting.
And you never know, there
Slow-
might be
slow
something that
walking.
happens, so I think it should be SP.
Okay, sorry, where are we again?
Outdoor recreation guide based operation. Second from the bottom.
You guys do all the other stuff, I mean,
I would put permitted in the corridor, yeah,
permitted or SP,
permitted.
okay?
Okay,
It's I mean, if it's park property, they'll have to get all the approvals through the park.
So,
Good point.
Services.
so down here on that section, under services.
Yeah.
Don't you anticipate most of that stuff being in your commercial area?
Yeah. But
Keeping in mind that their residential areas, they do have the provision for any intersection to be a commercial, to have commercial uses.
Okay.
So
and again, like a lot of these, I don't anticipate a funeral home being, but I don't,
Quiet neighbor.
never.
and again, it's gonna, a lot of this, the smart code is gonna be govern a lot of this, so.
Yeah.
Okay, other sections, and then the rest of the services, same thing. Storage. Outdoor storage and self-storage. And everywhere but T2 corridor, warehouse storage, and T3 or T2. I don't, again, this is something that we're gonna self. We're not gonna want big storage yards, but I don't know how to, where you decipher. If someone's got a bunch of boats or horse trailers.
Or you have a really high density area where people need to store the boats and things, so I think it's appropriate.
So right now, we don't have anywhere in the county that allows outdoor storage except for the manufacturing areas. And that has been a concern for the purpose of the storage of vehicles, camper trailers, stuff like that. The challenge is, how do we allow clean storage of vehicles while we're not allowing a contractor storage yard that is just filled with whatever the contractor wants to put in there? So that's the question. Now, you guys will do a lot of that regulation yourself. But I'm a little bit concerned that long-term, it could turn into something else.
So do you wanna clarify in the definition?
So items for sale, storage, or display outside of a completely enclosed building for a period greater than 24 hours, which are for or associated with a commercial or manufacturing use, or are stored at a commercial or manufacturing facility.
I think you can strike the manufacturing.
Manufacturing
I'm not sure where
term.
that came from.
That probably from the form base.
Nice, but it would be just commercial.
And I'm wondering how much you'd want that in residential areas.
I am too.
Exactly.
So do we just do, I'm with you.
Every time I go to Home Depot, and I usually come in from the back, if you ever drive behind the Home Depot on 12th Street, it is a mess. If you have a house or a neighborhood or something right up next to that, I would hate
Should we
that.
should we strike it in? T3, T4,
Allow it in SD, I'd say strike it in everything but SD1,
okay,
it's vehicle oriented.
Well, there, I'm wondering how much you really want it that much too.
Yeah,
Are you thinking like a place like, obviously Home Depot's not going there, it's huge, but the concept of they have stuff outside 24 hours or like right in front of their entrance?
that or, yeah.
like a
They
Ace
don't have
Hardware or something.
Yeah, they don't have screening up or anything like, oh, sorry. I see what you're asking. No, because they'll be bringing that in every day, right? They're not leaving it out there permanently. So if they're doing like sidewalk sales and stuff like that, this wouldn't even apply to that.
No,
Unless they are leaving it out there permanently, like chaining them up or something like that, like you do see at Home Depot, that
was thinking like Home Depot or FA or whatever, they change stuff up and just leave it out in front.
They do. Maybe we need to flesh this out a little bit
I mean,
more.
that would be, I mean, putting that in the vehicle, that would be a vehicle or any commercial use, but. That would be an example of what it could be, I guess.
Yeah, and the only reason why I would be okay if it's SD1, I share Rick's concern, but if you guys are governing that primarily, our only concern would be if you're not, or if you stop or whatever. And then Rick has to pull the whip out for the town architect and ask him why he's not doing his job.
Yeah.
Okay,
So which
keep it
ones?
Permitted in SD one, not permitted in anything else.
Yeah.
You got that, Geneva?
So just like that?
And then an SD two as well.
Can I ask
Oh,
a dumb
okay.
question that I should know by now? This town architect, is this a permanent position this neighborhood is always gonna have?
Yeah, we'll
Not just during the development, it's like permanent, okay, I didn't realize that.
that was one of the things that Bren brought up though, like what happens
When it's
at
all
the end of
done.
30 years and the agreement goes away and there's no more requirement for. a
Yeah,
town
this wasn't
architect.
clicking for me.
One thing on the agritourism, would outdoor storage make sense there if it's,
If it's agriculturally related storage, yes, and so we would just call that agriculture.
okay,
So that's accessory too.
okay. Utility uses, we just have them everywhere, I don't know, except for small wind energy and solar energy, not permitted in corridor.
What about self-storage? You're wanting that?
Self-storage, if they were.
Indoor storage units
Yeah.
for personal or household items.
Is that accessory to the primary use, or are you thinking just standalone storage units?
I don't know, I think, in some ways, there's some experimentation of. In West Weaver, if people have big things, does it make sense to have an area dedicated to?
There's definitely a need, especially the smaller lots that we're approving.
Mike actually brought this up as an interesting way to, like, if you have a bunch of guys that like boats. He could create a pod of garages that just store the boats.
Rear access or alley access, something like
Yeah.
that. See, that would be our only thing. We've talked a little bit about allowing indoor storage. The issue is when you get a wall
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
doors
Which would
facing
not-
the public
Which would
realm.
not fit the smart code.
So why don't we put a little asterisk on this, say self-storage, provided that those doors do not face the public realm.
Sure.
Yeah, because typically if you have the storage units inside and then you have commercial surrounding it, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's just, having what we have on Wall Avenue, where we just have straight storage.
Which
units.
would kill.
I mean, you're defeating your purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We agree. Okay, any feedback on the utility stuff? Public utility, quasi-public utility, wastewater treatment and disposal facilities, water treatment and storage facilities.
Hang on, sorry, catching up. Oh, so that's sewer, okay, wastewater. No, I think we're probably okay.
I just put no on solar and wind energy on the corridor. But energy. Okay, vehicle oriented uses. I wasn't sure on some T3, T4 stuff here. Parking lot infrastructure and conditional in the corridor. Well, we'll start at the top. Car wash.
I don't see car washes in anything except a major.
Except the
Yeah,
vehicle
so
oriented,
and no on T3, T4, T5.
Yeah,
but keeping in the SD1.
Yeah.
And not the SD2, right? Oh, it's already no.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and on all those, gas refueling station,
Not on SD1?
not on SD1, yeah, permitted on SD1.
Oh, okay.
I'd say the same thing, that's auto oriented
Okay, and on T4, T5 on gas station.
and SD2. Unless agritourism gas station,
I don't know.
where's that?
Where did we, is that like right at the entrance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's going through.
But you still have-
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm okay, I mean, I don't care,
Think a little bit about that.
we can,
If agritourism does, we need to have a conversation.
we'll come back.
Sounds good.
Parking
We'll
lot,
have to make that work. It'd be a fun concept.
parking lot or structure permitted everywhere.
Now, it's parking lot or structure as the main use of the property. So I want to make sure, as you guys were looking at this, you knew that that was, like, that's the main use, and you don't have to have anything else on that property.
I would say, and on Weaver Corridor then, right?
Yes,
This would be, so I guess the trailhead with parking, that would be an accessory use.
parking would be accessory to the trailhead.
That's why,
Okay.
that makes more sense.
Yeah, if you had an accessory, it makes more sense.
So I'd recommend that
You put,
parking structures by themselves, maybe that's in the SD one.
you put parking. Like pods that are kind of by themselves, like, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking about like the. The slough area that's gonna be a park and have trails running through it, if you just, randomly drop 15 parking stalls next to it. As, so that people can jump on and off the trail.
Mhm.
Would that be accessory to the trail?
Mhm.
Okay, then let's just
So I think
say,
you need to say, yeah, just keep this in the commercials area now.
So just SD1,
I don't even know.
I don't think you even need it.
do you want to take it out?
Just delete it.
Cause it's gonna be ancillary to something.
Right, it's gonna be accessory to the commercial use.
Yeah.
Ancillary meaning on
Or
the
sorry,
same side,
accessory to-
right?
Yeah.
That you could have in commercial areas, you could have a separate parcel that has a parking structure for all the commercial uses.
That's a
around.
good point.
Like
So you may
the
want
ones you have over
Sure.
here.
Five and TSD1.
Got a couple of vacant lots
And
that people like to
SD2.
use for
Okay.
pay parking.
That makes sense.
Okay. Passenger vehicle repair or service of any kind,
I mean, I know you guys are gonna govern that, but,
SD1.
yeah,
Okay, alright.
Yeah.
SD1, you. Trailer sales or rentals. SD1,
Man,
transit terminal,
is that, let's see, accommodate passengers, transfer, transit modes, other modes. I think you should allow that at probably pretty close, well, terminal.
everywhere.
It's a facility which is typically designed to accommodate,
so this isn't like a bus stop, right?
yeah, this isn't, yeah, not just a bus stop, it's like a mode or a hub, but what do you think, Rick?
Bus stops would just be allowed everywhere.
Yeah, just in the
But
public right away.
this would be more of a terminal,
Like, Fourth and Wall, right?
Mhm.
which seems more like along your corridors or where you're gonna have major commercial.
Yeah,
Like 12th Street and 4700, so SD1.
SD1.
Not SD2 though.
No,
Truck, gas or refueling station, probably SD1, yeah. Okay, alright. That was brutal, I know, sorry.
no, it's really informative.
That's our favorite part. Hawaiian.
Okay,
you just knocked out the third item on the.
well, I think that's the most brutal. Okay, max residential densities. 6 units primary dwelling units, 6 units per acre, that's in section 1.2. Any questions or controversy there? Okay, project land plan,
I've got some questions, so we'll back down.
on the project land plan,
Yeah. So, yeah, would you mind pulling it up?
you're talking about the transect?
This,
Yeah, the transit plan. That is the land plan, right? Yeah, I'm just making sure I got that right. So, okay. Make sure I'm oriented. This is that's the Holland piece, the Holland piece.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So that puts SD1 right up on 4,700. I just want to make sure the planning commission understands this. The form-based zone right now kind of uses 4,700 as like that future Center Street and 900, which is about here. Yeah, which is about here as that main street. So you got main and center kind of idea. The concept, we're not changing the name, obviously. Which you'd want to have less vehicle oriented and more well, non-vehicle oriented, whatever we call that. But this kind of pulls away from that. Not that it's a bad idea. I just want to make sure I gauge your guys's interest in pulling away from the concept that's currently in the form-based zone for this area in favor of more street-oriented, vehicle-oriented.
Well, I'll tell you our thoughts on that. Mike's thoughts a lot on that is it's a UDOT road, it's 130 foot right of way. It'll never be. People are never gonna be out.
Comfortable walking.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so the idea is you want it to, that's vehicle oriented, and then you want people to go into a safe space, and that's where the pedestrian oriented. I mean, I understand the concept, but. We just feel like in reality,
Where UDOT controls.
it'll never be a safe, nice road that people are gonna wanna be hanging out on, eating next to.
I'm gonna push back, not because I don't think it's a good idea, just because I think the facts are just a little bit different. If we walk outside right now, you've got one of those facilities. Now, UDOT is so reactive that they accept this facility as it is because it evolved this way, right?
What's the facility?
Washington,
Hell, you would walk.
Washington Boulevard. Mhm. And it's busy,
I
but
think this is what 4,700 will be, that's a point.
that's the intended, that's the intention. Now, to say, I don't want to say that we want Washington.
Sure.
I just think that it's gonna evolve that way, given all the traffic that's gonna be happening out there. The question is, because UDOT is reactive to whatever patterns are happening, they will keep it a high-speed corridor because they want to
Yeah.
keep responding to today's expectations. But if the community wants a village center there, the community has to actually take that bull by the horn and shake UDOT a little bit and say, guys, this is a Main Street concept. This is not, this is a Washington concept, not a 2700 North or Hinckley.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think our response to that is we are creating the Main Street corridor.
it's kind of like the junction, right, where you come off of the busy street into narrow streets. See a lot more people walking.
So that's a little bit of my concern as well. Again, I'm not saying this is the wrong thing or improper. I want to make sure that we all understand what's being requested. We're already pulling in some more commercial type operations inside of this. If you know how malls work, or casinos, the idea is get them in and don't let them know how to get back out again. And not to say that's what you guys are going for, we got good connectivity, but drawing that commercial further into this development will, just by market demand, pull it out of this area right here until this area has enough density to actually be the city center that has been kind of contemplated in the general plan. How do you guys feel about that?
So your suggestion, we just let natural growth go across 4,700, and eventually it will be a Washington Boulevard with face front stores and maybe parallel parking.
Potentially. Yeah, in fact, Ogden City wanted to get angled parking on Washington and UDOT shut that down real fast. Now, I'm not saying we should do that. What I am saying is I want to pique your guys' interest so you kind of understand if we go in this direction, then we should probably be a little consistent and relook at our form-based street regulating plan to look at 4,700 more for vehicle oriented. So the question for you guys, we already know 12th Street out there is going to be a little bit like 12th Street in here, right? Do you want 4,700 to be like 12th Street?
Then if we did that, we'd have to move that over to their other tail on the right.
So basically what's happening is either this is going to be, either 4,700 is gonna be like a vehicle oriented commercial.
Correct.
Or what Charlie's saying is he wants to be more like Washington, where the buildings are up against the sidewalk. And there's sort of a presence there.
No, I'm not saying I want it that way. I am saying that is how we
It's a
plan
decision
up
to
to
make.
this point. Yeah, so we're at a juncture right now where if we move away from that, we should plan on moving away from that uniformly. Not having the Main Street concept for everyone else, but vehicle oriented for
Yeah.
these guys.
Cause when we did the general plan, if you think about it, the manufacturing was gonna be catched with the corridor that will be going in eventually, and it won't be going up 12th Street.
Yeah, we should.
That will
Oh,
be
move.
filtering a lot of the traffic to the south and to the north instead of going further to the east. And so that reduces the amount of traffic on 12th Street. When that corridor goes in.
Keep saying when. Say that to gauge you.
Charlie, what would you, I mean, I understand that it's like a decision. You have a recommendation, you,
I don't actually have a recommendation because if the project's gonna be successful, it's going to attract as much commercial operations, pedestrian oriented commercial operations that the market will allow it to catch. And just by the very nature of it being there, it will create a vacuum on any potential commercial. It won't suck all commercial, it'll just create a vacuum to pull
Right.
everything in, right?
I kind of envision that because it's a north and south main and very few. That's almost like a Redwood Road to me already.
Okay, so that's a
Yeah,
good
leave that.
answer.
You'd have to start now with all three of those tails that touch.
Yes, and actually, if you look at the,
We don't want that out there.
if you look at the,
We got it.
if you look at the general plan actually shows vehicle and oriented commercial here and here. But it shows more Main Street, commercial here. So the idea of the general plan is you kind of get the Main Street deal. So you get the Washington deal until you get to about, the Temple, I guess, it's pretty close, maybe even the river. Over here it'd be 400. And then beyond 400 would be more like what you got for the rest of Washington.
But we wouldn't want any parking on 4700.
Depends. So the plan right now, if we did the, what is it called? Not vehicle oriented commercial, but the other commercial, the
With the
street
lot.
front commercial. Yeah, you would potentially get that Main Street look.
So you would have it, because of my mind's eye, I'd have all those cars back behind the stores.
I think for the foreseeable future, UDOT would 100% agree with that. Yeah, but.
That's a bad idea then.
No, but the idea is if you get those storefronts up to the right of way, even though it is 132 foot planned right of way,
Okay.
you get those storefronts right up on both sides. That will just by its own nature slow things down. It's enough right of way width that you got planter strips in the middle of the highway potentially, like we used to have out here. Still doing a couple spots. So you got kind of the boulevard style that really kind of slows that traffic down. If you ask UDOT, they'll tell you that there's no part of Washington that's 35 miles an hour, but if you go out there and look at the speed limit, it's marked 40 until you get to 21st Street, and then it goes to 35 all the way down to 28th or something,
I
29th Street.
thought the whole thing was 50.
I know it's how it's right.
it's gonna be 130.
130.
I gotta get.
132.
132, sorry.
Yeah, and we're going with 132 primarily because the street cross section that we designed for the form-based code, if you have a center turn lane, in order to have 14 feet of sidewalk, 5 feet of tree lane, 6 feet of bike lane, bumper buffer, angled parking, and then you have a travel lane. If you're gonna have a center turn lane, that's where your 132 comes in. Otherwise, we stick with 120 feet wide. So
I mean, it makes sense in a way, because I look at that the way people drive there today.
and that's how
And
you.
if they have a small lane, they'll eventually slow down after they run over about 100 people.
And that's the sad part about the way UDOT works, and I know that they have the reasons why they work the way they do, and they aren't the land use authority, so they don't get to decide what goes right next door. And so it's just, you got that silo doing their own thing, which is about efficiency, speed, cars, volume, and then you got community building on this side, and we have the ability to really hamper what they're doing. They have the ability to really hamper what we're doing, so it's just a matter of playing as a team and trying to get them to come to the table.
Well, and I think for us too, it's what is gonna be the most successful commercial there. That's.
Yeah.
It's a big part of why, I mean, Jeannie, if you go to the concept plan. And zoom in on that section. Right there. I mean, this isn't exactly, this is just a concept. The idea is that it's more vehicle oriented on the, go down.
I'm trying, it's taking a minute.
Anyway,
She's got a Mac.
Shut it.
you're trying to, it's more vehicle oriented, you're trying to bring people in. That's not really the commercial hub anyway. I think it's more, it just, our first phase would, it would have a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
think he's even designed it as a one way in, one way out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's not really a traditional vehicle oriented commercial, I guess.
Okay.
It's how Mike's envisioning it, because you're one way in, one way out.
but he doesn't think people are gonna wanna be on that road.
See, in my mind's eye, when this is developed out, the middle of the community is gonna be down closer to the river.
mhm,
And that's what I'm thinking as well. So this potential approval fundamentally shifts the mass of that community closer to that river in a way that we didn't anticipate when we did the general plan, not even when we did the general plan update to contemplate this. If we have that much available commercial space, that commercial space is going to start occupying where it makes sense for those commercial operations, right? And so it's gonna be where those houses are. So very likely this area is your new city center rather than
34 road.
rather than 4700 Street. So
I like the idea of the rest of the citizens not having to go all the way into this neighborhood to access some of those businesses.
Yeah.
Well, 12th Street will still be lined with all that stuff, right?
the intention of 12th Street is very limited access. So if it is lined, the accesses going in would be by controlled intersections.
Jeff, are you saying from the general plan, that's how it's laid out?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot more to convert traditional commercial, because people have to go in there. It's more fun.
Yeah, so you'll probably see your Walmart, your Sam's Club, stuff like that, either on 12th Street. Or if we start moving this direction on 4700, which is just fine. I really don't have any issues with that. This is your guys' community. We're getting really cool development out of this. Everything that we would have hoped and dreamed for in this area, it's just moved over a little bit.
Well, I agree with you, Charlie, though, with the fact that it's something we really need to consider, because if it is what you said earlier, it could totally change the face of the community.
Yeah.
So if it's Washington Boulevard now or Washington Boulevard 30 years ago or 60 years ago, there's three huge differences there, right?
Yes,
In how it was, so. And
or
for
100
me,
years
it's
ago.
like, it's hard to say that it's not safe if it's 132 feet. You look at Vegas, and I know that's a special specimen, but like people are on there in the droves, right? And it seems somewhat safe as far as walking that way with cars. I don't know if it's safe other ways, but is that really what we want out there? And I'm not saying that if we did that, it would be.
Well,
like
and I think for us on the transect map, we can color it just neighborhood like everything else and put a pin in it. Like we only need to, for us, this isn't.
Yeah.
We're not solving for vehicle oriented in that little section. It just doesn't make sense to bring people out on that road.
And I don't think vehicle oriented is gonna come anytime soon anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to have a lot of body.
So if we wanna just not color that SB1 and leave that,
It's actually in our form-based zone anticipates that we don't require that storefront to be built, but if you're not gonna build the storefront, your building has to be 60 feet back. So you have at least some space for that storefront to go there. And so I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay.
But we also say you can't put permanent improvements in there, because once you start putting those permanent, other than drainage, because once you start putting those parking lots and investing a lot of money in, then
So you're saying,
chances of that going away,
you do the 132 plus 60,
and then you're
and
building
then you can start doing something.
something else, yeah, your buildings, yep. I'm gonna just pull up the form-based street cross-section. Gina, do you mind if I jump on?
This is the piece you guys just barely acquired. It was for
Mhm.
sale, right? It was, we saw it as a residential piece.
Yeah.
before the
yeah,
fire, right?
windmill.
I mean, it had town.
Yeah. Yeah, so when we were first looking at that, personally, this was like when I first got on the commission, across the street was being proposed as
Yeah.
well, with the other one that fell through. To me, it seemed like it made sense to have restaurants, not necessarily facing the road, but just restaurants and some kind of commercial thing right there as an access. That was way before you guys came with this actually completely changing it, but I still could see that being a vision of that being some commercial space there personally.
Well, and then we're proposing, just
Yeah.
Not the same.
against.
Not the same, yeah. That's the thing, is I'm trying to envision something else as an example of what it would be, the difference.
But I think, in order to like. Keep going through this, I think we're okay putting a pin in it, Charlie, we can color it back to what it what the intent is, and then just,
That'd be like T5.
yeah.
And that might not be a bad idea, maybe we'll discover something else going through this to.
Yeah.
Make it make sense, right, for the whole project.
Just to help everyone just conceptualize what the form base is intended to do. This is generally maybe a little hard to tell because it's somewhat blurred out, but your building fronts here. You got a huge pedestrian way that you can actually sell goods in. You can have street dining, all kinds of stuff. You got a 5.5 foot tree lane and then 6 foot bike lane. A little bit of a bumper buffer because when you pull your car into these parking spaces here, you want to make sure you're protecting the cyclists from there. Then you got your 12 feet and then your half center lane. That's where your 132 comes from. It sounds huge. And if you go to most communities that were built around the wagon and then cars came later, it is huge. But 132 is actually not uncommon here in Utah. It's just a matter of how it gets built. Utah builds it like a superhighway. We're obviously not getting a main street. But if they work with us and we are able to work with them and get some really cool uses right adjacent, they'll have no choice but to slow things down. Beyond that, when a developer comes in to develop on that frontage, we will be telling them to build it this way. So go work with UDOT, get the permits, convince UDOT to build it this way. And at the point that it gets rebuilt and redesigned, even if it's just one piece at a time, that's when UDOT has the abilities to start changing speed limits. So the other issue with UDOT is they have to follow national standards. The national standard says you cannot change the speed limit on a road without a speed warrant study. Unless you're redesigning or rebuilding that road. And the trigger would be when we issue that land use permit, essentially approving
It's
that.
only 40 right now anyway.
Yeah, we'll just change it back color wise and deal with, you know, as we get into it, we'll go back.
So, real quick though, I like this, but I'm comparing it to, I don't know how the size of the road or the width of it in Syracuse, West Point, that area where it's all brand new.
Yep.
Beautiful, but it's a highway.
Yep.
This to me seems more applicable, it's more inviting to the community. Not that I'm completely, but like, I like the idea that you presented here, Charlie.
Well, and the concept runs right with the concept of what they're working on. This is the public realm, focusing a lot of investment on a 3-lane highway in the public realm. That's what brings your community together. You're absolutely right. If you put a highway going down there, you have to get off the public realm to enjoy your community. And that's not the intention.
And if we're wanting people to access this neighborhood the way it's been sold, right?
Yeah.
Then I think even the outskirts of your neighborhood should reference that.
Cool.
Okay, back to the project land plan. So one thing that's in the development agreement, and you'll see the sections referenced here. 8.3 and 8.16.
I stopped sharing.
Oh, sorry.
If you can go to the parent deck, I just want to show you. Well,
I don't know that we have an 18. In this copy.
8.16.
Oh, man. Here's my 18.
No, it's there.
Let me see. 8.1.
8.16.
8.16 is on project land plan.
You got it?
What page?
Yeah, what page?
All right.
Oh,
29.
He's looking at the summary of terms.
We can start it. The main one here is 8.3. 8.16 just references it.
Boundary changes, 8.16 on page 29.
Oh. I don't, that's not an applicable reference.
Yeah, I think you're right. 8.3 is,
Oh,
sorry,
Misreference?
misreference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, ignore 8.16, it's not relevant.
Okay, 8.3.3, it's on page 16. Alright. Sorry. Sorry.
Wait, does that mean the version you have, you added a bunch of stuff or you removed a bunch of stuff?
Which one?
The fact that we're going back so many pages to get.
No, I think it was an erroneous.
There, okay.
Sure.
Okay, well, let's read 8.16. Let's read 8.16. I'll read it.
Typical Jeff move.
Yeah.
8.16 is the boundary thing, if we were to acquire other land that we could bringing in under the same development.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not binding the county, it's saying. This is the idea, it still has to be a legislative action to go get it, I think it was part of what we talked about in the work session.
Yeah.
Okay. 833, so what we're saying here is we can expand a transect zone up to 20%. Based on market conditions, it doesn't change any density, but we're not allowed to change any transect zones up to 200 feet on an adjacent property owner. If that makes sense. So if T3 is really humming, we can expand T3. If T2 is, is better, we can expand T2, T4, T5. But we can't change anything within, like. We wouldn't be able to expand, if this is 200 feet, we wouldn't be able to bring T5 closer to this boundary. Because we don't own this property.
And
Does
the
that make
point,
sense?
point behind that is, the unit count doesn't go down, it stays the same. But we wanna make sure we're setting good expectations with the, neighbors. If the neighbors think that they're getting a certain thing next door to this, and it turns out that, it flips to a different T, transect zone, that's when issues happen, community issues happen, so. Keeping that change from being too close, but also providing enough flexibility. Did you also put in here, that you still have to have the transitions between transects? You can't just go all T5 somewhere? Not that you would, but. Still having the layers where,
Yeah, and I think that's in the smart code. When I talked to Mike over the weekend, it's like, the smart code would never allow a T2 next to a T5.
okay.
We can reference it.
We might wanna have that.
Okay,
That's easy to reference.
And you may even wanna put it in the TNZ.
okay,
Cause now we've got transects directly built into the
Yeah, we'll do that.
TNZ.
Yeah, just say as contemplated as smart code.
Yep.
Whatever, blah, 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 blah.
It might feel excessive, but for me, if you reference all of it, anytime anything like that comes in where it's covered somewhere else, it makes sense for. Well, that might seem like a lot, but
so,
so like you just said, you could reference it, right? Like if this is the document we're really living by, that we're gonna see and the public's gonna see,
Yeah,
I want them to be able to see.
Okay.
all
yeah,
these
that's what we're
things.
gonna add in
Okay.
here, so.
Yeah.
We're
just
gonna
gonna
add
say-
language into that 833 that says as contemplated.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like throughout this document, when those things come up, referencing, so.
Yeah.
it's easy.
so we'll just say transects have to be in a natural chronology, basically.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay,
Whatever the smart code says, because T2 kind of meanders through all of them, right?
yeah,
So it's not actually.
It's not perfect, and that's, if there's already a solution to it, let's use a solution, but if not, let's think through a solution. Just to make sure we're not getting stuff right next to the neighbors' properties if they're not ready for it.
okay,
Talk to
anything
Brett
else on project
about it,
and plan?
That it's
You
crucial
think of Charlie?
offsite.
How did Gary get it?
No, those were my only questions.
Just have it turn on.
He shut his mouth and all the hot air stopped.
Okay, development of the property, it's basically section 6, 7, and 8. One of the kind of the big questions here is phasing.
What page you going to? Yeah.
Okay,
On the page you've got here, you would be on page 14. There's just a couple of pages up from the link.
I think, I see phasing on 8.3.1, 16.
Yeah,
So I was just saying-
contemplates.
project,
Oh, I see.
development of property is 6, 7, 8, and then a couple of the concept plan and transit. So, so just to kind of maybe go through this, so 8.
Is it? Take that, Tiff.
I'll let Bryce know.
I
False
closed my mouth for a
information.
few minutes.
You know what? I'm glad, because if you're hot,
Fake news.
No number changed up there, but.
I don't know, that's just what he told me, so I just.
So really, these sections just contemplate,
Got 'em wrong.
phasing, logical phasing, you're not just doing this, you're kind of. Organically growing it. The biggest question I think we had for. the planning commission, Charlie, was the partial assignment. Right, going to a subdevelopment,
Yeah,
just that concept that we needed to address with everybody.
yeah, flesh out, and that's not necessarily a land use regulation, but my guess is that this group will probably have an opinion about it. I know just hearing from what Gage was saying in yesterday's meeting, as well as our discussion earlier today on the agenda. He's very adamant that, hey, if someone's selling us something, it's gonna be them that does it, otherwise it's not the thing that we're getting. Now, obviously, there's caveats and some built-in stuff. One of the statements here on development property, we did put some early metrics and triggers into open space phasing, just to make sure we get open space
So-
commensurate with the development.
8.3.2 talks about that, and the language that so the concern is. We start developing and you don't get the corridor, or we wait till the very end and the corridor comes. 8.3.2, it's on 16. So. The idea, and Charlie, I think this is your language, that, let's just read it. Each phase, shall provide for the platting and installation of a reasonably proportionate, I think we don't do that, but.
We went back here later, at least.
Yeah, at least a proportionate share of open space area,
The one that you got earlier today.
Small ones.
and any open space improvements. Even if such area improvements are not within immediately adjacent to the subject phase. Master developer shall be entitled to choose which open space area and improvements are provided for each space, however, unless. First agreed otherwise by county, no less than 50% of subdivided plats reasonably. I think it's probably easy.
Yes.
Open space shall be contributed to the Weaver River Park. By means of an this is our language. Of an open space easement to the county until the full Weaver River Park is covered by an open space easement. Notwithstanding anything in the contrary of this agreement, including without limitation to section 8.9.40. The only improvements initially required from the Weaver River Park and the open space easement is a 10-foot wide pathway. Should be constructed to be temporary pending more permanent plans otherwise specified herein, but shall be capable of supporting the weight of an ambulance and a minimum. The permanent Weaver River Park improvements contemplated in this agreement shall be constructed and dedicated in phases corresponding to at least the widest width of the subject phase, directly adjacent to the Weaver River corridor. So,
Did you guys adjust that last little bit? My request was, let's make sure that a subdeveloper can't create a blocking strip. So that they don't have to do any of the improvements on the
yeah,
corridor.
what did he say?
I think we said within like 100 or 200 feet or
Yeah.
something. I think I said 200 feet, because that gives enough motivation. That's a lot of wasted space.
So
If
the
it-
concern we have is that. If we're starting on 4700 and we're dedicating Weaver River corridor to the county, there's a huge. Gap in between, and who does that actually benefit? And there's some liability there with us and with the county to send a trail down Farmers Field to then. I don't know what they're gonna be doing down there, there's no one down there. And so the idea is that we're dedicating by easement that percentage of open space as we phase it. And then it's the second we hit that corridor, we improve that whole section that's been dedicated as an easement, and the easement triggers to a dedication. Does that make
We
sense?
would dedicate it with the subdivision plat that's adjacent to it.
So. This is gonna sound harsh.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're wanting to relieve yourself of the responsibility until you're ready to use it. Am I hearing that correctly, or is that wrong?
No, it's more. We're improving it, so if we're up,
Cause they're gonna use the parks or whatever for open space, they're gonna use it for what? Until you tell them, hey, you can't use it anymore? Like, it doesn't seem to make sense to me unless I'm mishearing.
Well, they won't have access to it, because there won't be a way to get to it. And so they would, our thought is until there's actual access to it, the county just has a perpetual easement on it, so. Charlie's concern is, well, what if this dies, you wouldn't have access to the ground anymore, you get the benefit from the lots, but we haven't gotten the ground. That's why we came up with the idea of a perpetual easement, so you get it. But it's
It's like a promise that if things go south, the county can
you still
occupy
have
and take
it,
it. You're right.
yeah.
Right.
But it's just until such time as it's actually accessible. That,
What liability are you guys concerned about in dedicating it?
for us.
Yes.
how do they access it? So if this is phase one. And we have to dedicate down here. How do you access that? Because it's being farmed.
And a lot of it's being farmed today, so it's like, who's gonna,
Well, even if you dedicated it outright, why is access the issue? I mean, you can dedicate it.
Without the improvement.
Yeah, so then the question was, does the county wanna own ground that's being farmed?
Why do you wanna own it if it's being farmed? I mean, why wouldn't they? So, right, Liam, I
Right.
mean, what it does is it provides not a promise of an easement, it provides the easement, it provides the property.
If you don't think there's any, I mean. We thought this was sort of a win-win because, but if the county's saying, we want it anyway. There's just gonna be private activity. And
Well,
no
there's a private
access.
activity unless we say no to that private activity.
Okay.
Because if you're dedicating it to us, we'll do what we want.
Yeah.
So we don't have to have it farmed if we dedicated it to the county.
Yeah. You don't
Okay.
have to, but you could.
We could,
It's an
yeah.
option. Sure.
Okay,
So it just seems to me, unless Charlie, there's a reason why you would rather have an easement, the county would probably rather have it outright dedicated.
Yeah, that was my original take on it. We definitely went back and forth a little bit on this, and this was kind of our compromise struck, but the safest thing for us is to ask for dedication.
and I don't think, if you feel, I mean, I think it was just the concern of, there's a parcel out there with really no access to it. We have no problem in it. I don't think that's a concern that we have, other than. You know, the improvements, I guess we'll put that 10-foot path. That no one's really access, I don't know what's happening with that thing.
It's just a dedication of the property, right? Liam?
Right.
With no
It's no
improvements
improvement.
until we hit it and then we improve it.
Yep.
Okay, I don't.
And then maybe another option for that might be that goes to the Parks District.
If it's
You know,
dedicated,
it becomes their responsibility.
yeah, if
does
it's,
it create any issue, I guess, you guys are the government, so you'll be able to answer this question.
indemnification, right?
Well,
So you could ask.
there is some liability there, because people will think it's public or private property, but if they get hurt or something, they sue us, but we can deal with that stuff. What if it's owned by you and then you have an obligation and something that can apply to there and include it later? Does it have to go to like public, or your agencies and things like that?
No, not if it's already written in the agreement.
Agreement supersede, yeah.
And in terms of, if you do plat it, normally we would wanna see some kind of a financial assurance for improvements. But where you've got so many additional phases, I think we've got a catch-all in here closer to the
We
end.
took care of that piece already.
Yeah,
Okay, so we dedicate it, we improve it when a phase is adjacent to it.
Yeah.
We would put the improvements in at that point, we're not required to put the 10-foot path. In
So,
nowhere.
so the only question I have on going in this direction, is. As far as recreation, parks, whatever, what is going to be done commensurately? For the population that you're going to start creating in a phase that's away from that area. So is there a park plan here?
Yeah.
You know,
So
how do we?
50% of our open space has to be within our area,
Mhm.
and 50% has to go to the corridor.
Okay.
So we still have to provide half of our requirement within what we're subdividing. And we could change those ratios if you guys wanted to, but that was, I think, what's thrown out there.
yeah, that's what we did with flagship. We said 50-50. You put your 50 in your development, and the other 50 goes towards a linear progression of the trail along the river. Just to make sure that the public is getting its commensurate benefit out of it,
So with that, they're the ones putting in the trail, right?
long term.
Long
Yeah.
term, Yeah,
Yeah,
So
when they get
with
development
that,
close to it.
if there's gonna be this time, like they're saying that nobody's able to access that or use that at this point, so they're probably not gonna put a trail in that's gonna go to waste, because it won't be maintained, right? So you put a asphalt trail in that gets ruined by tree roots or whatever by the time it's actually used. Are they paying some kind of escrow or something like anybody else would have to?
So because this is such a long project, we don't have to do that because we've got a little bit of leverage later on. And we've got the ability to pull that, well,
So we give Charlie the approval to withhold the next phase until that's done.
Yeah, but what if you get this phase, then you're like, crap, we can't do this next phase, and then we're stuck, and we have a trail that's not finished.
So, yeah, so we would have full dedication of that, and if someone were to come in and try and finish the project and pick it up, they'd have to put it
What
in.
about full dedication and the trail's already approved, already paid for with
An
money, so
escrow?
that it's done, yeah. I think it should be an escrow, because that could happen, and just because it's a long project or an anticipated long project, doesn't mean it's always gonna happen. And so then we don't only own the land, but we have the funds to put the trail in that they were gonna pay for anyways.
I think. Maybe a response to that is if we're not giving the benefit. We're not actually developing and doing the units and the project we have. Like, we're not getting the benefits, so we're not putting in. That improvement, I think.
But you are for each phase, right? Aren't you having to develop the trail at a certain pace with your
Yeah,
development?
yeah, we're putting it in.
Yeah, so you're getting
So,
that density for the community's improvements.
So we're dedicating the land on a 50% basis.
Right.
Which is a lot, I mean, that's a lot, the river corridor.
Right.
So the land is being dedicated in contemplation for that development phase. On a ratio that's more favorable to.
We would rather just do it phase by phase. I think the county would rather have it along the corridor faster.
all up front, including trail installation, that's fair, right?
All of it.
And I think that's the
I
other.
think that's the balance.
Here's the thing, I mean, I get it, it's a huge, maybe it sounds like a huge ask, but this is a huge ask.
No, I know,
So you're making a major change with our community, I want to make sure they're getting the best.
no, I think it's fair. I think for us, the first phases are the most brutal. Just from a financial, like, does it work, does it not? There's a huge investment upfront in infrastructure. If we can, I'm okay if it's like, a couple phases and then it triggers, even if we don't get to the river. But to have to put a huge escrow down on the first phase for a trail improvement that we're also dedicating a huge chunk of ground relative to the phase we're getting. I sort of feel like we're giving a lot in exchange for that phase in big chunks of it.
We know that things go up, right? So the escrow, if it's at market value right now, by the time you get to that phase, the county's probably gonna have to chip in something anyways to make up for the rest of that. Unless we have you do it at that phase. So I don't know, I think that's something, we don't necessarily have to come to an agreement now, but I think that it should be considered because. Yeah, that is, I get your business side of it and how it's a huge risk and everything else. But it's also a huge risk for our entire community to be considering this, so. Not that I am dead set on making you do that, but I think it's something we should consider to just protect our citizens.
But financially, it's not a bigger deal than if you had to go down there and start putting that in with your phase. So. What's commensurate here? You're still getting the bang for your buck. Lot for lot, by having to dedicate that property down there. So if you had, to Casey's conversation, so either you dedicate more of that easement down along the river.
Actually,
That makes that an equal value. Now, or you go down there and you do the part that's commensurate with that many, front doors. And you improve it and it sits there.
so we
Now,
figure
that's
out,
what we're trying to avoid because that doesn't make sense.
It won't be by the time you can actually use it, it won't be usable anymore.
Right.
so what you're saying is we figure out what the cost to install those improvements would be. And rather than putting them in, and instead of putting them in escrow, we invest it directly into the land,
Take more land,
the value of that land.
take more land.
Interesting idea.
Take more land and then maybe, so what this ultimately does is by the time of the phases before you get there, the county may control most of that property along the river. But you're going to be able to then go down and put your improvements in afterwards. In time with your development.
Yeah.
And if the county or the parks want to go down there in the meantime and do something with that, there's an opportunity for that, or the Parks District or whoever. But the county controls that property. And it just seems like to me that that's a better way than putting money into an escrow. Because like you said, the inflation is not going to keep up, the inflation is going to far outgain what the cost is going to be ultimately when we get that far.
We actually have a solution to that built into the code. At the point that they go to build, they're gonna have to bring in a new estimate and replenish whatever escrow we have.
We have to pay for the improvements regardless of what if the escrow pays for it or not.
Right. But is that something you're willing?
So
to
Andrew's
do?
proposal, the only risk for you would be if this doesn't go into the next phases, you lose the property because you've already dedicated to the county. Right, so basically the whole river corridor, sorry, it's been a long day.
So I guess,
Is the county,
But that's the benefit,
exactly.
because that's the
what I'm saying, yeah.
benefit of, you know, potential of
Saying yes on
fulfilling
the
the emerald necklace.
So,
I mean.
on the flip side, would it be okay to say, once we improve it, we then have a, you know, we've already because at that point, we've over given on open space.
So then you've got a credit.
So we have a credit for the next phases until we catch up to equilibrium, because at that point, we're improving the corridor on every phase, because we've already established a trail.
They're not saying to improve it, they're just saying to dedicate more.
Dedicated.
No, I'm saying, once.
So like if
once
your
we-
trail,
Hit the-
I think maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think you're saying is, okay, first thing says we have to dedicate 3 acres in the corridor. The trail is gonna cost X, we'll give you another acre in exchange instead of escrowing the money. for the
Exactly.
trail.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm
So like
understanding,
you're
I'm understanding, but once we get to the.
but you're not, so we're not actually improving it.
No, I know, but once we get to the corridor and we improve it.
Yeah.
Now we've dedicated and improved.
Which is what the agreement's going to be.
Yeah, but in terms of percentage above, so then does the next phase have to do the same?
Well, no, cause it's always how much open space you have, so if we gave up.
That's what I'm saying.
So I think
We get a
if
credit.
we played with the credit, so you can if anything that gets front-ended for the next phase could potentially be credited back. So just to try to explain further what Jeff's concern is if we're getting the river corridor a lot faster, but they're only developing this fast, going up that way, there's a whole lot of river corridor that we got for no cost from them. They're only putting in improvements here. By the time they get here, they've got there's a huge deficit in what that proportionality is in our favor, which, I mean, we might say, thanks, good. We might say, okay, we'll
That
let you.
might prevent them from continuing on.
But what's the difference? All you're doing is you're getting to an end faster. You're getting property ownership and you're using that credit or equity by the property that's being dedicated back for your density.
Yeah.
Well, by the time you get to the end of this thing, we're all equal.
Yeah.
We're all
No,
good.
I agree. All I'm saying is if we, like, phase 4, we hit the corridor. We've already dedicated the land plus the improvements in land, right? So we have a ton of land. Our open space is way more than our required ratio. Can the next phase not have to give up as much open space because we're already improving? It's as though we start next to the river in the beginning. We start next to the river, we dedicate corridor, we improve it.
You're saying whatever you quote unquote gave to buy the trail, for lack of a better way to explain it, you get that back once you put the trail in.
As though we started, you catch up, once the river improvements start, you're catching up in the phases, and then it becomes. It's the same, unless there's a phase where, I'm not trying to overcomplicate
So as
this.
it's improved, you get the what you bought back.
So you might,
Charlie,
you might be
Just so your
putting
percentages are evening out.
front ending, maybe it's 70 instead of 50-50, maybe it's 70%, just for sake of illustration. It may be 70% for the first 3 or 4 or 5 plats that come in. But by the time we get to a certain percentage, we've got the whole river corridor, there's nothing left to dedicate, it's just installing improvements. And so they've only got maybe 2 or 3 phases left, but they've got 100% of of everything dedicated, with the exception of that little segment of trail that will come with that plat. What that means is, are we going to continue to ask for 50% open space dedication with each of those final plats?
No, because we already know what the total.
Because you've already gone.
As well as front end.
Yeah.
So back out of that just a little bit, I think what Jeff is saying is, if that's the end goal, and the last 4 phases or 3 phases, there is no open space that's gonna be required to be dedicated. Can we taper it down more gradually? So it's not at phase 4, no more as open space needs to be dedicated. Maybe it's not as much has been dedicated. And at phase 4, instead of at 50%, maybe it's 20%.
But I guess
or
you're only
30%.
required to give so much open space anyway.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You know,
We're
just
just
take it
taking
down
that
naturally.
percentage of open space regardless, right?
It's.
If it's 50 acres or whatever the total is,
Yeah.
right?
What's gonna happen is the county's gonna be banking your open space.
Right. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's the exchange. And then the only requirement you're going to have after all of your open space is given up is then putting in the improvements.
Mhm.
So what's do you predetermine what a ratio of
So-
ground per trail is?
Or maybe instead of waiting until the end to put in the improvements, it's like, okay, now it makes sense to do this portion, they can do the improvements instead of giving us 70%, you just go back to 50.
Yeah,
But there's going to be, there's going to be a place where there's no more to be given, but the improvements are gotta start happening,
Right.
because that's what's going to get the rest of
Cause that's my
that.
fear, is we get to the end, and like, well, we can't do it.
Exactly.
We're done.
Right.
Whatever.
Well, we still have to do it as we subdivide the adjacent property, we still have to install it. So like, that's how
That's right,
we
yeah.
solve that, right?
As we're building up the core, I'm gonna ask William's opinion on this. Is it too complicated? Is this,
I don't think it's too complicated, no, and it's. As far as the ask goes, whether the ask is too much upfront, no, you guys can. Do we wanna make it, that's the cost of doing business, that's absolutely within your discretion to do, for sure. Yeah, it makes sense to me. We could put it on paper and have it make sense.
I mean, I wanna be fair to everybody, you know, if you want to be successful, we have to go out to be successful, but I wanna err on the side of our community,
Well, I think
right?
land dedication is a lot easier than improvements
Yeah.
upfront. Right, like I think we were.
And I'm comfortable with
That's
that
the goal,
because,
to let that improvement come when you can get to it.
Yeah.
Right now, you can't get to it starting on
Yeah,
47.
and it's like we put that money in and just.
For nothing.
We just wasted the album for.
Yeah.
cause I like that, and I like Andrew's idea, because even if you do go bankrupt, whatever, like, I'm not trying to put bad.
No, but you want to.
But if you did, the county can still say, you know what, it's a dirt trail, let's go get the mower and mow it down, and you guys can ride your bikes on it.
The county says, we have that part of our emerald necklace.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether or not there's improvements in there, and if this goes bankrupt.
Exactly.
We'll be looking at maybe 7,500 per front door on a 20 acre by 20 acre development, and all that money can be invested in putting in the rest of the improvements. So-
So then we will have
The
to.
question is,
Now it's like
what value per acre are we gonna, is it gonna be after rezone, or is it gonna be before
Yeah,
rezone?
how do we establish that?
I mean, that's the hardest part about this concept is like, how many acres is worth how many feet of trail, like. or how-
I guess it would be at the time that you're doing it, right?
But like,
Whatever.
is it a market, like, how do you, maybe do that?
So the cost for a linear foot.
Because the emerald necklace is like priceless, so it's hard to.
Yeah, the quarter is.
I think
There
we
you
got
go.
this problem. I don't ever envision it.
I think let's just.
Not down the
So
list.
that's fine, but we can do that where they dedicate
More land.
more faster, essentially.
Yeah, we get it.
Well, I think North Ogden even has this where you can escrow land and, or like give them I don't know what they do, instead of like a letter of credit, you can actually give them a.
Oh, yeah.
Ground.
Yep, like first lien position. That was something that we talked about, Jeff, a little while back. How do we tell the community that you guys are invested in making this work? And to me, default on property going to the county is, I think, a really big thing. To me, it's more than putting money in escrow, because
Me too.
money decreases.
The land will climb each year.
People out there value the land
Yeah.
more than the money.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
And as far as the use of that land goes, I mean, we could see what we can work out with the county commissioners. We've got a publicly dedicated right of way and another portion of the county. That we've got an operation and maintenance agreement with the landowner next door, basically saying. We agree that you can install this portion of the right of way to access your property. However, we're not maintaining that portion of the right of way. You are responsible. We could do something like that, for a landowner who wants to farm it or something like that.
Okay. Well, I think we'll sync up and just, get some language we're comfortable with.
Yeah, maintain it while it's just sitting. It's better if somebody's interested in farming.
Let the plow run up and down. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
Plus it'll
that's
be
the big-
county property at that point, so if the farmer falls off his tractor, it won't be his insurance, it'll be the county's.
You should just allow Casey access and that's it.
I think that was the big thing on the development of the property. Next section is the town architect. So, the reference is 813.2.
Yeah, I have a page, too. I'll tell you.
It's 27. So. We changed this,
The concept's the same.
yeah, if you drop down to this section in the summary, the county oversight of town architect and design code, that's probably more, basically what we're saying is the town architect. Is going to be responsible for basically administering the design code, and then down below. What we put in with Charlie is the county has ultimate oversight in that town architect.
Is that why it's a nomination from you? So what?
Yeah, we nominated, county has to approve it. If county doesn't like what's they're seeing, they have the ability to basically call us in and say. We don't think you're adhering to the smart code, your design code, and the tenancy and the development agreement. And they have some teeth there.
We went back to two, Charlie. Two.
The way I was reading, I was like, wait, does that mean third strike you're out, or does that mean?
We
Fourth
went back
strike.
to what you asked for.
Okay. So basically what 8.13.4.2 says is it's removal after repeat non-compliance. This is if we've given them written warnings a couple of different times for not complying with their own design standards or the smart code. And they continue to do it. It's 3 strikes and you're out. At that point, the county can enter the procedure to remove the town architect if we choose to do so.
And then we would jointly find another one to administer all the stuff.
The paragraph immediately prior to that, and it looks like you guys adjusted language just a little bit of this, but paragraph immediately prior to that is the immediate removal. The intention there is if the town architect, is violating the American Institute of Architects Code of Ethics, if they're committing felonies, if they're in gross negligence, all that kind of stuff, we want to be able to get rid of them a lot faster. And so what this does is it triggers the requirement under default essentially to meet and confer, get together, talk about what the problem is, both with the developer, with the town architect, with the county commission, determine whether or not an immediate removal is actually merited after we get the whole story. And then if it is, we remove them. During the middle point in the interim, they can nominate a replacement or an interim town architect while this trial is happening, quote unquote trial, is happening. Who could then, if the architect does get removed, the interim can then potentially step into those shoes. So just trying to find ways to make sure we've got a big enough stick to keep the town architect accountable to what we're being told is we're gonna have, as well as the master developer or any sub-developers that come with the property. We just want to make sure we got that big stick.
Can I make one suggestion to consider? Rather than 2 strikes, I guess, within 1 year, can we do 2 strikes within 3 years? Just in case we get a certain person that's like, oh, I can get away with it once a year, or you know what I mean, like doing something shady. Am I reading this wrong? So
3 strikes it's really 3 strikes.
within 1 year though, on the 3rd strike, you're just letting them go.
Like you're saying a roll, so you're saying the rolls, and not.
I don't want them to only be held accountable if they're doing it all within a year period of time. I
Oh,
want like a
gotcha.
3-year span.
Yeah.
They're like, hey,
That's fine.
you're out of compliance more than 3 times in 3 years, then you're
Yeah.
out of here, dude.
That's a good comment.
Okay.
Yeah,
Am I reading, is that what this is
No, that
intended?
is what it said,
Okay.
within a 1-year period. That's right.
I totally read that differently. I thought that,
That's a good comment.
yeah, that's a really good catch.
Yeah, the one prior is like, the immediate is like if they do something real bad, we call them like bad boy acts.
Yeah.
The Bad Boy Act. I like it.
It is a new name, but young girls like that idea. It's trendy. Back to Diva.
Yeah, so trendy. Doesn't work out well, though.
Once that change is good for the non-compliance.
I'm looking at the additions that you have, that you just barely gave this morning, and
The ones that Charlie's, or the
Craig sent.
Craig's in.
I like these, the version that you guys had was a little bit watered down in terms of what immediate removal is. I wanted to make sure if the town architect commits a felony, under investigation for, child issues. I want to make sure that the county is not in a position where we have to uphold that position. We want to be able to immediately say, we're not supporting it.
So this is covering things not only associated with the development, but just in his general character, or this person's general character. Good.
The nice thing about that section, is we're gonna be 100% aligned that we don't want that guy either.
Yeah.
That's stuff's easy.
It's not for you guys. We trust you guys. It's for whoever buys the property later.
Yeah, sure.
And then we pay him, but he's not our employee. He has to be independent and really, I mean, it's. The autonomy is, we want it to look and feel like we wanted to and per the smart code and the design code.
And just to be ultra clear, like, the town architect is purely aesthetic. Like, it's design, I know it says code, it really is like what it looks like, what it feels like. When you get into like engineering and life safety stuff, county's still reviewing and approving.
Any concerns with the town architect stuff?
Charlie? You good there?
I think I am, yeah. I think the original draft I sent over, under 8.13.5, master developers removal of town architect. The intention of that paragraph there is that master developer does not have unilateral authority to remove. The reason for that is, I was a little bit concerned that, master developer decides they don't want to have to pay the fees anymore. They found a cheaper architect who maybe isn't as good. But, we want to make sure that master developer doesn't have infinite discretion to just do cost savings. If they are doing cost savings, it's also complementary to community betterments. And so we had a few extra things in there saying that, town architect shall not be removed if it's, what we say, like personal conflict.
We're not working with someone.
Personality conflicts, right?
We already
Or,
have that in government.
yeah, you're stuck with us. We also said things like, if the reason to remove is only financial cost saving, stuff like that. Working with Jeff on this, we actually struck that because I think the main body of the paragraph 8.13.5 gives the county commission everything it needs to make that removal. So in other words, the master developer can come to the county commission and say, we got to get rid of this guy for a good reason, present that good reason. County commission still has control over whether or not that dismissal happens. But, we're not going to withhold it as long as we're all playing fair. I mean, if they get unruly and we decide we don't like them anymore and we just want to punish them, then we can make them stick with the same town architect forever, maybe. But I don't think that helps the project be better. I don't think it helps set it up for success. So yeah, I'm long way of saying I'm good with the way it's written.
Okay, this is jumping up here, design code. So the design code is just, it's what is basically the smart code that the town architect creates. It's a living, breathing document. But it's based on the zone, the VA, and the smart code.
And this is the aesthetics, it's still looks and feel.
So there'll be an initial draft that they put together, you've seen it, and it's all the setbacks and heights and that'll be an initial DA and then that will continue.
That's about the only paragraph that Charlie hasn't commented on, so now we must be okay.
This one is actually, it's been one of the ones I've put a little bit more thought into. Because there is a provision that allows the town architect to essentially control that document and change it without our consent. Now there's some catch-alls in here where there's some meet and confer with the planning director. There's some reporting requirements, so they've got to tell us how the code has changed. But it's kind of in my mind, from the beginning of this, it felt like a blank check in terms of design that, I didn't want to get us to the point where this community gets 90% built out and the town architect starts making decisions that really affects the neighbors who have been paying their taxes in that community for the last 29 years, right? So I put a lot of thought and tears and all kinds of stuff into this section to figure out the best way to make it happen. And I think just having the removal of the town architect at the full discretion of the county commission, that's all the teeth you need. If that design code comes back from the town architect with something in there that's really terrible, county commission can trigger that dismissal.
Okay, next section is open space.
Thank you, get that pretty hard with the corridor and the dedication and all that, so.
Charlie, do you have anything you want to touch on open space?
You don't have anything more? I think you hit most of my
I think we
concerns.
talked a lot about that. The corridor.
Okay, minor adjustments with the improvements that are expected. So, planning commissioners, if you're looking at page 25, minimum Weaver River Park improvements required. So first off, we're not saying what kind of improvements need to go on inside of the private park open space or the plazas or whatever. We're gonna let them have full discretion over that. The chances of them doing something dumb with that space is gonna be low because they would need to make something that is actually appealing to buyers. So the market will take care of that. This section here, minimum Weaver Park improvements. This is kind of a placeholder of improvements. It protects the master developer from us requiring way too much later on. It protects us from not getting enough from master developer. The intention, however, is that open space, that public park open space master plan that is on one of these other pages will supersede, to the extent that it contemplates these things, will supersede this. So basically, the master plan, once we get to that point, we can come in, we can either revise, change, omit, do whatever we need to do. But it also, the way that it's written, I want to make sure I wrote it the way that I thought I did. It's written to say that once the county has agreed to that public park open space master plan, this stuff goes away.
And that master plan will include all the items here. Pathway, the grading, the vegetation.
Yeah, so actually, yeah, it does allow for them to even look at the pathway, grading, vegetation, all in a little bit of a different way. But
Just the minimum required, and so at a minimum, our master plan would include this, and then we could go above and beyond.
yeah, there we go.
For the master plan.
Yeah, and the county has to sign off on that master plan, so it's still kind of a legislative thing, even though we're giving them vesting in all of this stuff. This is really, the vesting would be your permission to go spend money, because you're getting units and you're getting style and stuff like that. So go get money, go get leveraging. And the final touches on those legislative approvals will come later. And if they don't, this is the default.
This is at least a minimum.
It's the fallback. Yep.
Okay.
It's the what happens if you don't grow up and get the degree in the field that you want. You have to have a fallback plan.
On 8.9.5.4, there's this highlighted on May. Charlie, this is basically, this is that whole hydrologist study. If we build within the 300 feet, it's 8.9.5.4. If we build within 300 feet, we have to have the hydrologist give recommendations on how to, mitigate it. And the only reason we put May in there, Charlie, is we don't want to have to do everything. We only want to do what the hydrologist recommends, which is above. So
it's a requirement that we follow what hydros is said, and this is a list of things that you could.
Okay, so a list of potential considerations,
to illustrate it.
not all inclusive. He could come back with something else.
He can say whatever he wants, you have to do it,
When we were talking about the corridor, I got something in my brain, and I hope that it's not a wrong impression. And that was that bank along there is gonna be graded down. Because the reason I wanted the 100 feet is because given all the items that were being discussed, and one of them mainly being a concern of our engineering about the corridor being big enough, to be able to get in there and do maintenance around, right? And so what I envisioned, and we saw a picture of it more than several times, and I'm not sure where that picture wasn't around here.
Norton Commons, I think.
It may have been at Norton Commons where there's a river, it's, probably a bigger river than the Weaver River, but, the banks were rounded off, the bank was rounded off, at least on the one side. I don't know what the other side looked like. And it was, a nice grade up, and the walkway was along there, and then they were using it also for flood mitigation. That's what I've got in my mind. And I'm hoping that that's what this is gonna end up looking like when we get.
So there's this balance between natural, like the trees, which are on the bank, you can get rid of all the trees, and smooth
Pretty
it out,
much,
right?
you do,
And-
because they're not native anyway.
Well, I think that the idea is that what is when you have a big event, flood event, how does the river,
Right.
be able to contain the thing without taking the banks down and flooding our community? And that was a big part of the hydrology study, which is, there's all these different mitigating things. I think for us, how does the community and how the general community and the community of this place, how do they interact with the river? Is a big part of what we want to do. So if it's like, if you're walking along an edge, that's,
Yeah,
we don't want that.
Good.
And so I think there's gonna be, we don't know every section of that river, and so I don't want a carte blanche, like, we're gonna round it at this angle everywhere, because there may be sections that you go around it, or they could be different, but I think generally that's.
Well, that's why we're gonna do a study for every section too, because the hydrologist might say, hey, you probably shouldn't touch this piece. Okay to touch that piece.
Well, your elevation up where you're gonna build, and I don't wanna make this a long conversation, because we had many long conversations about this, but your elevation up where you're gonna build is not going to change. You're not gonna drag dirt out of there and build lower than what the elevation already is. So the only problem that you have on that river is where the bank has been built up. But if that's mitigated and made wider, the buildup's not going to be necessary, because the capacity of the river will be bigger, will handle it. So what I just don't wanna end up with at the end of all of this is something that if I live long enough to go walk on it, or somebody's pushing me in a wheelchair, but I still have enough brains upstairs to say, man, that looks just like it did when I was a kid. And we did all of this and we left this the way that it is, so anyway.
Well, I share that, and with the trees, I love the trees, I'm down there all the time utilizing them, but every year they keep falling over like dominoes because that river is doing that, so I agree with Andrew. I think it'd be a good idea for us as a planning commission to
Go
take
walk
a
it.
little field trip and either walk that, but like walk the one that we already have a perfect example of the system that's being used, whether it's right or not, but look at it and see what would benefit and what we would want out there.
I
I was
highly
thinking about
debated,
this last weekend when I was on there, I was like, oh, we should come as a planning commission and look at
yep,
this.
I highly debated whether or not we would do that for this meeting. We just had too much stuff to
Yeah.
go over.
You've done it.
I haven't done it yet, actually. I'd love to go do it as well.
Thought you were
We
gonna
get some bikes or some, those electric scooters, that'd be great to see Wayne on a scooter.
Which
Alright,
section are you talking
But yeah,
about?
I agree, I think we should look at it.
I'm not sure which section
But I-
we're using scooters.
Yeah, like, if you're using scooters, it's already approved.
I think we're using our.
We got
our
razors we can put you in.
Trail. On top of a bank.
On
that's
something
just
that's gonna fall
be-
away.
But when we go on this little field trip, if we do it, you will see that that's how they've done it.
Mhm.
Right below 1900, it's literally the asphalt is right there on top of it with a 12
Oh,
foot.
you're saying going on a field
Oh.
trip, not necessarily to the property, but to other places where. you've
Yeah,
seen
look at
that
what's
happen.
already been done, so we can say, does this really work? Is it working or is this a bad idea?
Like
just
the
going
one in
down,
West
just walk
Haven
out
or
these
something?
doors and go.
Okay, off 1900,
Yeah.
that goes to the
Yeah,
cemetery.
like 21st Street
Okay.
or, yeah, right, that's
Yeah.
probably a good spot to
Yeah.
start right there.
I
Or
think-
even right by the old Coliseum is another one.
I think the protection we have in here is the hydrologist is gonna say. You can't build a trail. On that.
Yeah.
Right, you have to do X, Y, and Z. to
And that's
get
what I'm saying, I think
stabilization
there's some areas that, although it would be nice if it was all rounded off, it still could be utilized the way it stands right now.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're gonna put an amphitheater or something
Yeah.
like you propose, it better be rounded
Yeah,
off,
right.
right? That's all.
I got kind of an off the wall question. Rivers are a lot like algae, but what you do to one side affects the other side.
Yeah,
Are you reaching across the river also?
So we're not, I mean, we happen to own another part of the section.
Oh, down low.
Yeah, but we're not touching them.
see, the problem's gonna be is just east of where I live, on our side of the river. Is definitely affected on what happens on the other side. And that's where they built the
That's
spillway.
why I asked it, Wayne, I knew you were awake.
That's kind of a little touchy deal, because, you know, hydrologists might say, well, it don't bother. But you're gonna have 50 people at your door saying that, it did look.
So what if
So
we,
I think that there's a sensitivity there. Then the other thing I would say on making this on your property in the Gibson, wait, Bennett, is that it? Where that's not smoothed down, if there's trees down there, you certainly should take those out. Because sooner or later, they'll be somewhere else on that river. And so I'm thinking that, you know, you're maybe not smoothing the bank, but you might wanna reach down and get those out of there.
Is this different than what's on the hydrologist thing? Did you put that in the flagship PA?
no, this was specific to, I think you guys,
Or
you. No, oh, no, let me rephrase, because I wanted to actually bring this up with you guys as well. We don't specify hydrology, in the flagship one. We specify, expert, qualified experts, in the field, so whatever that is. I'm a little bit concerned that we're only talking to a hydrologist.
Who else did you put in the list?
Well, it was just qualified experts, so for them, we've got kind of a fallback of what can happen if they don't do, actually, no. We said you can have your rezone, again, this is assuming that the commission signed off on it, they haven't yet. You can have your rezone, but you can do nothing until you do a stormwater and floodwater master plan. And through that stormwater floodwater master plan, that's where they'll, that's where they trigger the expertise. The stormwater floodwater master plan and the master plan isn't complete. until the County engineer is satisfied, so they kind of wrote it open-ended.
I
Like,
mean, the reason that we put, like, we would be dealing with that and the expert we go to, and Gary seemed to really like. Going, call.
I think this all comes from that report that we had going in common draft.
Yeah.
That we submitted, Gary loved it, so put the language in there. That's kind of where this came from, right?
okay, my thought on hydrologist, just to help with Wayne's concern.
Well, I don't think, we say a licensed engineer. A third-party licensed engineer.
Oh, okay,
We
hydrologist
don't
isn't
actually
specifically
word
listed.
Yeah, we don't usually.
That's what my comment was. My comment was, in the state of Utah, a licensed engineer,
That could be Daniel.
if Daniel is licensed engineer, yeah. It could be someone who knows how to build bridges, or someone who knows how to plat subdivisions, that may not know how
Somebody that
water.
drives a train?
Yeah, someone who drives a train. But they might not know how water flows.
You want to caveat it with expertise in the field.
Yeah, of the subject matter. If you look at, I think I have a comment. If you look at the county code, we've got a definition of what a qualified professional is. And so if we just use the term qualified professional and we default back to the county code for that definition, I think we'll be all right. But there's more to that river. I just want to make sure it's clear. There's more to that river than hydrology.
Well,
Yeah.
plus there should be, that comes into play here that probably isn't here, is what's the county flood plan.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
that in here, so it's
Okay.
flood proofing, it's hydraulic modeling, it's environmental impact. Obviously Army Corps and,
Keep going, you're making me feel good.
erosion control, like, so what we have to provide. What we have to provide in the study is pretty detailed. Okay. It's pretty robust.
Appreciate that.
All right,
Okay,
no, that was, I'm sorry.
No, I think it was-
Sidetracked. We didn't spend nearly as much time as we have in the past on that subject, so that's good.
No, it's a good question, though. Do we want to do something like we did in the flagship agreement, basically saying, yes, you're approved, but you can't move forward until you've done your stormwater master plan, flood water master plan, and mass grading plan?
Isn't that how it's already written?
I kind of think that's
It's if we
necessary,
develop
see
in
if
that
the whole
area.
thing's gonna work.
Right now, like, we start on 4700 west, like, you're a mile away from it, you know?
I think one of my suggestions was, once you drop off that shelf, once you get in the 500-year floodplain, maybe that's where that
I mean, we
trigger.
already have our stormwater
Yes.
master plan.
We have to master pretty much all of it. Very, you know,
Well, I say to trigger this study.
I think it's,
From
Oh.
from Bowen and Collins or whoever, it's probably just within X number of feet of the river.
Yeah,
oh,
I mean,
thank
we
you.
have that master plan anyway, because we.
you wanted to know how to deal with it.
No, what he's saying is the master stormwater and floodplain, and I'm saying we have that anyway, because we have to know what size of anything we're putting in any bases, all the pipes.
Especially, yeah, the storm drain especially.
So the question is are we doing regional detention facilities? Are we doing little tiny detention facilities in someone's backyard that gets filled in?
Please no.
Look at it, it's
No.
on it's on the master plan, actually. You scrub one sheet.
Oh, sorry.
By the way, I haven't seen any of these yet, just so.
We got them now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Most of it going in the slough,
Mhm.
similar to Daybreak, how they have
And then
the big lakes.
A little bit here. But the rest of it really is the slough.
So I guess the question is are you guys going to be looking at the entire property or just pieces of the property when it comes to grading, drainage, floodwater?
So flood and storm,
Thank you.
will be the whole, I mean, it's a master plan.
Looking at the whole, okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have,
Yeah,
so I think if we were to say, once that is done to the satisfaction of the county engineer, that'll include whether or not what portions of the bank gets graded versus what stays, right? Cause if you're trying to accommodate for the floodwater right there, you're probably gonna wanna grade back some of that bank, right?
but
I guess it's when you trigger this study from like a Bowen and Collins.
because it's like in the phase that would be impacted by it, then we would do something to the bank. We're not gonna touch the bank until we get to that point.
Like if we started on the piecework from Holland. That's phase one.
Yeah.
Having a Bowen and Collins study on the river at that stage probably doesn't matter, and it's gonna change
especially yours.
in a year
Later,
subsequent,
yeah.
right?
Hopefully it doesn't change.
Sure.
Hopefully the science is solid enough that they can look over multiple years and apply an average, right?
Yeah.
If anything, what's the value of the study?
That's the key, but looking at it from the grand scale, obviously most ideal situation, but obviously the most expensive upfront. Looking at it on a subdivision by subdivision phase, that creates a lot more, potentially a lot more stormwater detention facilities that the county has to operate and maintain later on. If you look at it from obviously this, especially if that's not even county owned, we could just go in and say, hey, guys, get your HOA out there and clean all the trash out or whatever. That would be super ideal if you make Gary's day. But point being is, are we modularizing this? Or are we looking at it from a master?
So I think,
perspective?
yeah, and I think for us, we have the master. The floodwater is probably more what you're referring, like on the bank standpoint,
Flooding.
but we're bringing so much fill.
So grading and all that, I think grading, stormwater, floodwater, I think all those go into the same study. Even though I think in this document, as well as in flagships, we split them out as separate things. I don't see how either of you guys do your project without looking at both of them together.
I think it's more, how much of the engineering expense do we have to do for phase 10?
Right.
And hydrologists,
That's where the change comes in, because phase 10 might actually be built a little bit differently in 5 years from now versus.
yes, well, conceptually, but it has capacity for the ERUs that work. So I mean. We can share the stormwater, the master, because we have to have that.
Yeah,
We do conceptual master plans up front. But as they refine them as each phase goes for the action thing that's built.
and I think that's probably the way that we would want to look at it. It'll be a general master plan
Yeah, we have to.
that sets the guiding framework that everything then responds to within that boundary. Grading, for example, especially if you got subdevelopers and especially if partial assignment is going to be allowed. If you put 6 feet or 10 feet over here, then you sell that piece over there and they're not planning on doing 6 or 10 feet, we've got a problem.
We
For sure.
agree.
Okay.
Okay, we'll put some, All right,
What was Craig's concern about talking about floodwater planning in here?
his thing was, flooding is governed by FEMA, by the way, just the words.
Mass grading, other than earthwork reasonably required to build streets and lots, master main agrees that no mass grading shall happen until the stormwater master plan is submitted. So we already have one.
Boom. Is that
We already have it
something,
in there.
something I wrote or something you wrote? Because that's brilliant.
It's okay.
You already had that in there.
Okay, flood, he was concerned because it's FEMA that governs that.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's aware, but FEMA,
He made a comment.
So this is his comment, and we can get him on the phone. But stormwater applies to county floodwater is outside the county purview. This language blurs the distinction between floodplain development, which is below, because we say we can't develop in FEMA flood zone A and E, like nothing can happen. And meeting stormwater standards, which we will, otherwise flood people out.
okay, no, that answers the question very well. So if you're,
Floodplain that we cannot develop in that floodplain.
okay, we modeled this language after the guys to the south and they have a ton of floodplain and they know they have to engage the federal process to
Yeah, we
change.
don't
that.
really have a lot.
That answers that.
Okay, roads, next section, so Geneva, if you can scroll down to. Charlie, I don't know, this is our transportation, map on the screen. We just included,
These are the arterials and the collectors.
Oh, I like what you did up there. It's, I mean, it'll be a little bit of a struggle, but that's okay. That connects in where we need it to. I'm talking about planning commissioner seven.
That's why we struck the language of Plain City. That's connection in Weaver County.
That works, and I'm not sold on it having to go that way. You guys, if you wanted to choose going this way, but point being, I think this is 700, right?
Yeah.
So it'd come in, kind of follow that slough and go up and
I
around.
think the thing for us is, it's so far away, it's there, you have it,
Deal with it in
and
future.
then once we get designing on that phase. we can-
You guys come in and ask for a modification if you wanted to and all that. Okay, yeah, I like that. The other question, so 900, so tying the project into 900 is a concern. Especially if we're gonna have that village at 900, having them play off of each other is gonna be really important.
Why didn't they put that in there?
No, this one right
Because we
here.
amended,
Cause we have that road.
Yeah, it goes like this, doesn't it?
Yeah, so
They
come up,
want a different street section in there?
come up here and it goes through kind of a
Yeah.
Calthrop model. and
Yeah.
Comes back together.
okay, we can add that.
Yep.
And then the only other item on top of that is. What Craig has proposed here is that we're agreeing that this meets the connectivity standard, which it doesn't because there's not enough detail.
We changed,
Did he change it in the version that you guys?
sent today,
Okay,
cause we responded to your things.
But we can, so what we're doing is one thing that, I don't know, is we need to get into the streets, Charlie. Like the exhibit shows the major street sections. I don't know, it's more of a Gary thing.
I sent you over those, right?
Yeah, so we put those in, we also, okay,
Yeah, at the end of the day, Gary can allow modifications to it, but we've started working with having the planning division essentially start saying what design applies where with the engineering division following.
okay.
We
We can
want
get into those
our
exhibits.
community streets to be community streets, not transportation, highways,
Yeah.
super highways everywhere.
So we have the exhibit for major streets, cross sections for major streets, and then we also put in exhibit for minor streets as well.
Okay, and is it a minor street? Is that close to what we have or is that
It's
These
all
are
the
all
other,
Mike's.
it's all of Mike's cross section, other than the street or what we have. It's not-
the one?
You don't have it available.
We do,
Yeah,
yeah, scroll down. So. These are major streets. Now, there's one
This is
caveat,
a-
I want to get you guys' opinion on, so actually scroll back up to the transportation.
Run you over.
So we've been to several of these and they're really cool, but they're one ways. So.
But
you
it
know,
splits.
But it splits, and so that section's obviously gonna be, if you scroll down.
Still one lane road.
you know, it's like, it's a 12-foot. One lane,
You're not trying to fit two-way traffic.
And you don't have any one ways or two ways that have to be one.
no, we
No.
heard that loud enough.
We figured that out.
So you say one way, is it two lanes going one way? That's that same width, or you're saying one lane?
It's just,
one
you got a
guy's
2-lane road and then it splits.
Okay.
So you got one going this way and one coming this way with some sort of a median or something in the middle.
You might even have buildings or something in the middle, it might be a difference between.
What's the cross section of those roads? Is it, what's the width? What's the asphalt width?
On the lane,
Yeah.
it's the same size as, like, if you go to the 80-foot section.
It's your normal 12-foot travel lane. It's,
Yeah.
there's nothing.
And parking on both sides or?
Like
Just
this one has
one.
parking on one side,
Okay.
go
Go
down,
down that one, that one's parking on one side.
this is parking on two sides.
But still 12
Well,
asphalt.
Space in the center, so you can do your balloon animals and so on.
Splitting them into one ways is definitely gonna be more expensive than just having them on one facility, so.
Like you can see based on the buildings on the right and the left side, if it's got the piece that comes out like an awning, that's a commercial. If it looks like a little porch, that's residential.
Okay,
So the right would be a residential, the left would be a commercial.
and you're planning on using this in both areas then? To where it could
Is
be,
this where they're gonna have the one way?
Yeah, will you go
Yeah,
back to
that's
that
what I mean.
split?
This cross section is
two-way.
double, double,
That's an 80-foot right of way.
yeah. But this would be,
So he gives an 80-foot right of way section for residential areas and an 80-foot right of way for commercial areas. Like a main street.
So the blue one in the middle of that first map is the one on the right.
go up.
right. You're talking this section, yeah.
So like, you know, you would,
Sorry.
yeah, so that answers my question, so it's residential.
yeah. I mean, it'll depend on where in the plan.
Yeah, it's not, it's probably not residential, cause that's
This
right.
is T5,
T5.
it could be residential, it could be
So it would be the one that would. that should say
Commercial.
commercial.
Yeah, over in Norton Commons, I probably have told you the guys this, but they had some really cool diversity, single family residents right next to a dentist, you know, and it all really worked well together. It was surprising to see.
Right next door to them.
Better brush your teeth, don't
Scroll
know.
down,
That captures the whole traditional.
Yeah.
That's right.
keep going. Keep going. I think we have, so this is your section.
These are 4712th Street
Mhm.
that you asked us to add in there.
And then these are all the minor streets, these are all the. We just wanted, I mean, I'm sure Gary's gonna look at this, but we just wanted them in here as sections we can do.
And regardless of how Gary feels about it, we've been told that as long as the finances show that any cost differential to take care of this is yours, then
Okay.
our boss, my boss's boss said, we'll hire the people that we need to, as long as there's money to take care of it.
And that's the concept, we agreed to that concept of you guys do your little study that shows, okay, here's baseline, here's what you're costing, and here's what you gotta pay.
Yes, and I think my comment was, I think that's your study that you're giving us.
Okay.
I-
I remember that back.
By our licensed engineer. Anything else on roads?
$5.
Anything else on roads?
Well, I like those on there, I think
It's
good.
public right away, I don't know, I think we touched on all this, yeah. Public right of ways, utilities, pathways, open space, yeah. Development application, so I think there was some concern, we just wanna make sure that. This county still reviews every application. Town architects still inside it.
This is going back to my comment about engineering, life safety, building and stuff in Palm County. Really, it's aesthetic stuff.
Subdivision plats.
Is it, do we specifically say what components of design from county code are waived? I think we're okay as long as the design code takes care of that. So if a design review comes in, well, two parts. Part one is, design review now, according to this, would just be, planning commission, or sorry, not planning, planning director approval. Now, our design review, sorry. Yes, Mike will do his design review, then that
Yeah.
comes with your consent and Mike's blessing to the planning division, and then it's all, Rick. In an administrative meeting instead of coming to the planning commission. I just want to make sure the planning commission knew that. I don't see an issue with it because I think the heightened design coming from the town architect is gonna take care of anything that you guys would otherwise do that, but I know that there's been some sensitivity in the past to if we pull some things out of the planning commission's purview, that you guys didn't want pulled out.
You know, I like just being informed about it. It just helps me sell it to the community, or not necessarily, I shouldn't say it that way.
I feel
Helps
like,
me explain it to the community better.
sorry to be interrupted. I feel like if we go through all of this and the agreement's right and as complete as it can be, we won't know that until we don't know it, right?
Right.
And I just feel like I'm good with, administratively taking care of those things. I don't think there's any reason for a lot of this stuff to come back unless it's major changes.
It's kind of my thought with conditional use permits as well. I want to offer to give you guys the chance to give yourself a free night off by not having some of those things on your agenda.
Well, how do you guys feel about it, Rick? Charlie, I mean, do you feel like there's situations where you'd feel more comfortable bringing it to the planning commission?
Well, I have some reservations because whoever is sitting in this position could do some really good things or some really bad things. And so, putting it all on one individual, cause I'm not always gonna be here. And.
What?
I know. And so.
You have at least 30 years.
Just saying.
Well, that's fair.
That's, a little bit of a concern, but I think, the county's always probably gonna be looking at trying to have the best individual in, that position to meet whoever the legislative body's needs are, so.
Is there a line where you would say that no matter who's in that position, there should be
I'm wondering-
review?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there should be some language that allows the planning director to make a determination, to go to the planning commission.
Okay,
Um,
I like that idea.
because I think there's times where, the planning director may feel like, let's have the planning commission look at
Share
it.
that responsibility.
Or, yeah.
Well, there's times when
Or
some
get,
developers-
some other views on
Sure.
it as well, because, I don't think that, that one individual, it just sometimes, I think, gives that individual too much authority, which I don't necessarily agree with to a certain extent. But at the same time, we want to be able to allow you guys to do planning stuff and not worry about these
Right.
administrative things too.
Right.
So I mean, I would hope that whoever this person is, whether it's Rick or, whoever it is, that, they take the responsibility and not try to just punt it all the time to you guys too.
See, yeah, but I see it the other way too, because if whoever replaces Rick, when he decides that he wants to retire and skiing is more important. If they are a complete puke, right, then they could be like, well, I'm not passing on to the planning commission at all. I wanna, whatever
Yeah.
their reasoning is, so it could go the opposite too.
Right.
As far as the
Planning
design
director.
stuff, cares much, but like the conditional use things, I would like to at least know about that,
Absolutely.
have some kind of input on that.
A couple of,
Personally. 'Cause
couple of-
that's, I mean, that's where the community's really gonna care,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What the architecture or the colors or whatever, like,
not as much
even if they do care, like, it's like telling you can't paint your house a certain color.
question of priority.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the conditional use things, like when we were talking about, when we were going through that table and we're like, well, this really makes sense, or this doesn't, or, oh, we should consider it. If we have to consider it, then we should, I mean, that's why we have concerns, we have feelings for
And I
it.
don't know, I mean, I don't, tell me, I mean, I've read this thing more times than I want to. But I don't think everything goes, I think there's like
Right.
very specific things that go to the planning director.
I thought it was everything, but yeah, we can
Well,
look at that.
I think there's some, yeah, most everything does, but I think there's a few things that does.
So administrative amendments.
Yeah, so what you're looking at is you're looking at changes to how the development agreement applies, not to the administrative approvals of individual designs or land use. So a couple of thoughts on the whole discussion. Right now, the design code is written in a way that the planning director does look at things that are an acre and less. And I can imagine a ton of things in this project being greater than an acre on a design review level. Also, a project that's involves a building that's greater than a certain amount of square feet, which again, it's big, it's Walmart, size buildings. So huge parking lots would probably still come to you under our design code. As written, I think it gives Rick the authority to sign off. I think I agree with Rick from a political perspective. If Rick starts doing his job poorly, I mean, the county commissioners need to remove him. That's why the position is at will. But in the event the county commissioners and Rick are in collusion to undermine the planning commission, maybe there's good reason to have a planning commission look at some things. I mean, that was why the system was built the way that it was, so that you get better eyes on from a community level and a community perspective before it goes to the elected officials. The other thing is, we see it every day. We work with developers every single day who apply so much pressure, and you get to a pressure point where if they don't get exactly what they want, it's one phone call to a boss who then has the purse strings on whether or not you have a job the next day. And that does hurt things a little bit. So having that come to the planning commission, the county commissioners really respect your guys' role and are a lot more likely if they don't like to listen to Rick, they'll listen to you guys at the very least. So right now, everybody
Why don't
plays
you go
nicely
through the
together.
list and just propose what you think of them should be?
Actually, I'll probably just suggest we stick with what the design code says, our design code. Sorry,
Yeah.
not your design.
Okay, just send it to us.
Okay.
In terms of what, the planning commission or the planning commission has.
In terms of what has to come, I mean, we could just do, look, the planning director can do it to his comfort level. Anything he's not comfortable with needs to go to the county commissioners on design. Planning commissioners, yeah, thank you, design. But the parts of the design code that aren't going to apply, that's where we want to kind of parse out. If, landscaping, colors, materials, that kind of stuff, we probably don't need to have that in there, but traffic control and, whether or not we need more right of way, that kind of stuff, we'll definitely still want to have some control over it.
Right. Okay, assignment and transfer. Whether county commissioners already have a strong opinion on this, but I don't know.
Their opinion isn't definitive, but they do have a strong.
So for us, I think the only thing here is on an entire transfer, for some reason something happens, we want to transfer it. The county commissioners have to agree to the transfer. What we put into is partial assignment. And it suggested that it's the same process. I'm not sure why,
I think that's fair.
right?
Isn't that what yeah, I think the latest iteration, we just said if it's a partial time, it goes to the same process as the whole thing.
As long as the county commissioners can say, we agreed on one whole thing, splitting it, especially with that particular person that we're splitting it with, goes against, the whole original approval, so they can reject it in that case. I'm okay with partial. In some cases, you're definitely gonna want.
I think that's how that's our intent.
I thought our intent from the beginning with this and flagship was that it had to be them or else it would vault it back to what it originally was. Is that still our idea?
That's what the planning commission has said all along, and I've been trumpeting that horn all along. I think what they're saying now is partial can happen, but it has to have county commission consent.
Approval.
And county commission approval has certain standards. I mean, it does say cannot be unreasonably withheld. But if they can't meet their financial obligations, if they've got a history of poor performance, if
They thought they're not getting what they approved.
if it defeats the whole purpose of master planning the community, if it creates greater administrative burden, those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that the.
And those are the kind of things that make this whole thing invalid, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Because we're
that's
agreeing that
where the
before
planning
you follow it,
commission
that
comes
doesn't
in.
work out for you, it's not gonna work out for the other person, and it's gonna go back to what it should, right? Isn't that what we did with flagship?
Potentially, But it does give the county commissioners the authority to say, all right. We can drink the
know
new
this person
developers
can-
Kool-Aid.
keep on the project.
Otherwise, it's just, see what we.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
partial assignment would be like a phase, for example, like we would stay the master developer, we.
You're still
Control the town architect,
Responsible for them screwing up if they do.
and then we would transfer a phase to them and let them, and then the county commission approved it. We could assign it to them and then they would do the phase.
So in that case, Casey, if the county commission does approve it, which they're not obligated to, then these guys would be relieved from master developer responsibilities on the partial piece that went. So your thought process, yes, is the concern that you have, yes, is very much the same concern that I had. But I think the catch-all is the county commissioners get to make the choice on whether or not partial happens. Which, I mean, frankly, despite what is written here, we could say no partial assignment allowed. And through the legislative process, we could change that just as quick as creating a new development agreement, right? So I think that discretion already exists.
I think, we understand, I think for us, there's just this, I mean, 30 years, I don't know what's gonna happen in 15, and we're not saying we just sell it and it's whoever else, I think there's a contemplation that if something happens or makes sense to have a partial assignment or full assignment, we have to go through the county and through.
Yeah, I think, what's that? I'm still concerned with it, I guess. I probably need more thought on the decision for your benefit or I just feel like you should still be the one responsible for it. Like, I feel like maybe I was wrong, but I felt like flagship, that's kind of what it is they're responsible for it. If they want to have subcontractors doing a certain piece, whatever, that's fine, but they're still ultimately responsible for it.
Yep.
And if not, then whoever the new person is comes back and goes through all this bullshit again.
Yep.
Which sucks for us, but it also ensures that they're gonna do.
And I guess if we get to that point anyway, we come and ask you for a partial.
If we deny it, then
Which, and when I'm saying that, maybe that is a waste of time, to have to go through all this again when it's already been done, we're saying this person's gonna agree to the same thing, and the commissioners are okay with that, that's why I
Copy
say
paste.
that I need to think about it, instead of just saying, well, shouldn't be that way.
yeah,
But it's the protection.
Yeah, that's my whole thing, is that we can assure our community that they're gonna get what comes out of this, and if it doesn't, then it just reverts back to what they. The
there's a
ones that
lot-
Oysters are saying. they
There's a
want.
lot of things where it's like, we're really comfortable working with, Rick and Charlie. And had giving certain rights and approvals because we work with them, but I can't obligate Charlie to work on that, even though I love him to,
just come over to my house in 30 years, let's see what we can do.
I think that's part of it, it's like, this is like a 20, 25, 30-year project,
Right.
and so we know that there's gonna be people cycling in and out of the county side, even though we're giving a lot of approval rights to the county.
Yeah.
And we don't know who's gonna be approving it at some point.
No, we'll still be here. Wayne's 150.
So I guess we're just asking for similar.
I just wanna think about it before, and it's not that it has to be my decision, but I'm a little uncomfortable with it because we were really, again, I could be wrong, but I felt like we really held
Yeah.
flagship to
I do
that.
have some
crescent.
input.
We did.
I think personally now, actually helps the project.
Yeah, and it could.
It gets good competition. And in addition to that, might take some financial burden off somebody else who can run alongside that side faster.
I could see that side of it, as long as and again, that's
And
where.
we shouldn't take away their options. That's like signing away your options or.
I just don't want this to go through and then them be like, well, we're done, we got our part through, let's sell this to somebody else.
I think that's where we put the
Sure,
line, yeah, and I think that's where we
Put teeth, we put one, we're okay with teeth.
Yeah,
I think
it seems like you guys have been this whole time, it's just, I know things happen.
No,
And I
guess-
get told a
I
lot
guess-
of things and then we see on the back end where it doesn't come.
Okay, so you're
That's the question.
enunciating all the issues that I've had with partial signs on all of the development agreements we've been in. In fact, if you look at the development agreements that we've done over the last 2 years, we have the provision that says no partial assignment in there. Full assignment only. Now, that doesn't mean that our projects aren't being split up. They are being split up and they're being sold to the highest bidder, but the master developer is the default person responsible for it. The big big issue for me is infrastructure concurrency and open space concurrency. And if a partial assignment happens where the new assignee picks up all of the river, not knowing that they picked up all the river, say we got the whole river dedicated. But now they're putting in their first subdivision phase over there, and all of a sudden they gotta start doing all these improvements that they didn't realize. It really opens the door for people who didn't do proper due diligence to come back and cause big administrative problems for us.
How did it end in the flagship development?
They said we're used to this. It'll be our project forever, and if we get rid of it, we'll get rid of it in whole, or we'll come back and ask you to allow us to split it.
So there's no section that talks about partial assignment or assignment?
No, assignment, yes, it just says assigned in full. Now they have the full authority to parcelize it out to developers,
Sub-developer, but I think that's contemplated here.
Yep. But they're sub-developers. If they fail to perform, we go back on the developer, we say, whoop, default, whole thing's under default, master developer, go figure this out with that sub-developer. Now, Rick and I.
Which I think has a lot of teeth for us, which is a good thing, because here's the example, we went down to Vineyard, right, and looked at that. And one of the things they pointed out to us that we know, it was like, oh, it was a little bit different, like, yeah. This and this was not right, but that's because we subbed that out to this other person, or not subbed it out, they allowed somebody else to do it, and they're like, we didn't have any control over that. And it kind of made an ugly mark on their whole entire community, right? That's what would happen here, because then you'd be like, well, yeah, we partially did that out with that person and they didn't do what they were supposed to. It's not really the vision that we had, but it's them. Go after them.
We wouldn't want that. I mean, we'd rather
Exactly,
have
so
it.
that's why if you just stick to it as being the main person.
So we have language about sub-developer here that has all those teeth.
But that's different than just giving the
And
responsibility.
I think, I mean, I don't, but I think we go through, I mean, if we need to partially sign it. We come through the process.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to think through this because maybe I'm comfortable with this team going to the commissioners and saying, yeah, we feel like who they're saying is gonna do it is gonna be fine and hold to that. But I still like the idea that if you're proposing something this substantial, that you're the one willing to stick through it and do it, and it's either all or nothing. Like you're either gonna go in all and have to sell it all, or but I see both sides, cause maybe you wanna be able to finish it and have that main vision that you're coming with, but you need a little help because of financial times with the world, who knows?
So that provision's already in there. That's parcel sales. They could sell the northern half of the entire project. They're still responsible for making sure that it's done.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like, again,
Let's agree and look at it. Cause master developer retains a ton of teeth, even if we partially assign it. So we'll just have to look at it, see.
What actually gets assigned. So another development agreement that Rick and I are working on in the valley. Their attorney said, hey, just so you know. If someone is installing a hotel on a piece of property that they bought over here. And they're not, the master developer isn't freed of their obligation to do what's happening on this hotel site. It affects the hotelier's ability to get financing because they're tied to somebody else. It affects the master developer's ability to get financing,
Makes you hold
because they're
the
tied
fire.
here. Which that was our assertion. We said, that sounds great.
If this was, I mean, we keep talking about how this is getting us away from these little tiny things just popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the.
no, we
the-
understand. I think what we thought was giving the county, the right to deny it. Gave some protection, but if we need to make that.
Again, and maybe there's more discussion that needs to be thought through or whatever, but.
Yeah, take a look at the assignment section and see the standards.
What
for
page is that? And
denial.
I'll put it on there.
Somebody say 11.4.
Well,
Page 34.
I'm gonna say that I like what we did with the flagship. I think that that's a, pretty cut and dried way, and you
Yeah,
guys
11.4 assignability.
kick it too hard back.
I mean, for me, I'm like, if we gotta come ask for. If there's a reason we need it, and we have somebody that is. Capable and can do our vision, and we go through a legislative process. Right, I mean, there's nothing preventing us from putting planning.
Caution, it's negative.
But there's nothing preventing you from continuing on by just managing it, and it gives us that teeth, like you said, to withhold you. from-
No, all I'm saying is, if for some reason we need it or want it, and we have a compelling reason that you agree to, we could ask for it. If you don't, then we don't get it, right? What I'm saying is, again, without talking to Daniel, if this is a huge deal, we can deal with it when we need to deal with it and take it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
Just-
we're
I'm
all
only
planning,
basing it off all of our previous discussions and what we really held flagship,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing we can compare you to. We're not the same, but you're pretty close to the
No, I
same,
mean,
and so we want. It just, to me, it seems like that would be fair.
Makes sense.
and if we're all playing from the same playbook and we all have a good relationship, then the county will continue to want to see that, the success of that development.
Yeah.
And so we'll be looking for ways to help that be successful, whether that's partial assignment or not.
And that's where, that's why I made a comment earlier. When I'm sitting across the table from you all, I agree with that comment. I just can't lock you guys in for the next 30 years on this development.
No,
Yeah.
but what you can lock in is that, and to Charlie's point, just to put a little more weight on that. And that is, the county's not here to screw you guys over. Because by screwing you guys over, the county gets screwed over. What we wanna do is have something good at the end of the project. So you should have some confidence in the fact that looking at us, yeah, it might not be the same faces.
Yeah.
But the integrity is still the same, because it goes hand in hand, the
Yeah.
success goes hand in hand. Well, I mean, now, I want to do, just, if you guys were done with the presentation, and thank you very much. Actually, with as much as we had to cover, I'm impressed.
That was a great way to do
So
it.
that was, I don't know how many times you practiced that.
And thanks for letting us just be open and
Yeah.
straightforward, because it makes things a lot easier, and please don't be offended.
No, I think this is.
That was great.
But I do want to kind of just, ask the planning commission, because on next Tuesday's meeting, they're scheduled for a public hearing. Do you, and we know that there's another revision of this that staff really hasn't had an opportunity to, review. And it sounds like we did talk about some of the changes, and I'm not familiar enough with the document to know where, why, and what for on all of those changes. But what I want to know is, we only have a half an hour pre-meeting before that meeting on Tuesday. Okay, that's what I want to know. Do we feel comfortable? So if we don't have enough time and we leave the public hearing on the schedule, and it's up to you guys, but if you leave the public hearing on the schedule for next week, it's potentially and probably going to get tabled. So, commissioners, I'm gonna ask you, do you feel better having another work session to review your recommendation to the applicant? This is what I'm looking for. Would you recommend, and it's just a recommendation, but would you recommend that we have another work session to go through this one more time before public hearing? Staff has an opportunity to review and give their comments, and not in a consolidated 30-minute program. And then we possibly, if these guys will allow it, we reschedule a public hearing for another meeting.
That would be
So,
my recommendation to them, just because I feel like it would allow me personally the opportunity to review it and to prepare myself for being up there. When we get up there, we don't want something that we're gonna have to deny or table. We want something that we're like, okay, we're confident this, we've been through all the work sessions, we understand. Unless there's something major that the community brings up that should make us feel otherwise, I feel like we should be prepared with it. I don't feel like I'm there with you, and so that wouldn't benefit you. I shouldn't say, I don't feel like I'm there with the document, not with you, sorry.
I think some of this stuff, I'm kind of the opposite. We can leave to staff. Because they're the ones coming up with these ideas anyway, and working with these guys, and they know what's going on for our county. And to delay these guys, I see no reason as long as they can work it out behind us.
and the only comment.
I don't see that our preview as being engineers and hydrologists and everything else that goes into these.
And I agree with that, other than I haven't, I'm sorry. Other than I haven't read it to know that that's the only thing that's in there. And I'm not gonna be able to get to it before Tuesday completely thoroughly, so.
I tend to agree with my partner over here, the
Oh,
next
yeah.
guy. But, you know, for me, I really hate tabling something, because to me, it might be something really valid. But to the people sitting out there, ooh, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And so, I'm completely okay with the staff going through this. And I know that this thing here is a, how I wanna look at it is the best document in the world sometimes has its flaws. But I'm thinking for me, I would like to see Charlie go through this and get the stuff in here that we talked about tonight, and maybe have another work meeting. So that we can buzz through this thing, so that we're all feeling comfortable with the changes that went in. And I think that if, in my mind, and I'm putting myself how I used to work when I had a real job, is that this is a good document. I'm pretty much like it, but I think that what it needs needs a little more gravy and potatoes in here to make it so that it's gonna be easier for me. Because right now, the only reason I would probably table this is if I didn't understand what's in here. And it's helped immensely tonight, but my recommendation would be to get the best document that we can and have another meeting like this, because this has been a very productive meeting. And I think that what we can do is maybe that might expedite the process in the end. So, long story.
One quick question, I know, because a lot of this document is not planning specific.
Correct.
A lot of it's just legalese, so.
Yes.
Are there specific, when you're talking about, let's get to a point where it's baked, are we talking like fully negotiated all of the?
No, section 8.
Whatever sections it tells us we should be aware of.
Yeah.
No, honestly, I don't know. You understand what we
And
should-
Charlie did a good job of highlighting in gray today in the draft that we have. The provision to chart.
So would you say that the gray sections would be those sections that we want to make sure kind of done?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't need to be legalese done, they just need to have the,
Conceptually.
yeah.
I mean, I noticed there were some like utilities, and there's some stuff in here.
There's a little bit of gray overlap, right? Gray, sorry, there's a little bit of overlap in what is planning versus what is engineering and utility and all that, so. I tried to err on the side of caution, so the planning commission.
Sure.
can see it.
So you
And
think
just
we've talked
skipping
about a
through
lot
your
of what
own
we need, Charlie, to,
I do, actually, I feel really comfortable,
well, then
after
maybe
this.
you ought to get with them on the rest of it. And then just before the meeting, like wink at it.
I'll wear a certain color.
No, anyway.
Okay, I'll wink right.
Well, no,
That's how the
It's
old.
all good.
That's why.
Cause I don't think we need another meeting. I don't. If you could come to it, we're gonna take from you anyway.
Yeah.
We got 4 more minutes, so I'm gonna give you my comments and my recommendation. I would suggest, because of what Commissioner Andriotti said. In the essence of time, I think you'll find the time goes shorter if we have another work session. We get the rest of what we can take care of now. Through staff, back out to us, and we have potentially and hopefully a meeting or a hearing where we can actually go through the whole process. Because I think just based on our history, and especially with project this size, I can almost bet you that it'll get tabled at the meeting. So that would be my recommendation as well. So you guys take all of that information for what it's worth. I appreciate, everything that's happened here tonight. This was a very productive, out of everything that we've done over the last however many months it's been, this was very productive. We got a long way, and I appreciate that. You guys everybody put a lot of effort into that. So thank you for that.
Well, if we're gonna have another meeting, we gotta give them a target of what it is we want them going in.
Well, you know, that's, they gotta make it's their final decision whether, whether they wanna pursue a hearing or not, but you've heard, what we've said tonight, and I think if we had our, other three members here, probably the majority would have said what the majority said tonight,
Can I
so,
throw an idea?
yeah.
And it's something that I don't know that we've done, with this planning commission in the past. What if, knowing that next week is probably not gonna be the last planning commission meeting for this. What if next week's meeting, we plan on having a work session, we still hold the hearing. We don't list it as a decision item. You're not tabling anything. It's just a discussion item with a hearing on the main agenda.
For
And
the
then-
public,
and then the public can come speak their mind. That might give you guys a little bit more context to come back at the end of the meeting, come into a work session and discuss that context. And then the meeting after that, you'd make a decision. You could always continue the hearing to the next meeting. So you're not tabling anything.
so
You're just
what would we be voting on then?
You wouldn't.
So it's basically what happened with flagship, we just tabled it, and
Yeah.
the same result happened.
But I want one hearing. I don't want a continuation, so part of that has a caveat of having a
So what the
continuation. of the
people
hearing.
say, yeah,
I want one.
and if we don't, we wear them down anyway. They won't come.
Well, I don't know, they wear me down pretty hard, I'll tell you
No, they don't come,
that.
they just don't come, they come once, say.
Yeah, well, the risk is though that the.
Public joins us.
It turns into a work session essentially. You guys just end up asking all the same questions you would have in the work session.
Yeah.
True.
And I think if you had a work session. If you had a work session next meeting, I think it's not gonna be the best thing because we've noticed it as a public hearing. And then we wouldn't be able to have this type of open dialogue with this full room of public
Right.
behind us.
Right.
And-
Well, and when we do essentially a work session, an unofficial one in there, it ends up being, cause, in my opinion, I feel like the community raises more concern off of that. 'Cause they're like,
Yeah.
We're having to try to figure out things while we're
Yeah.
there, they're like, oh, this is really confusing.
Yeah.
Whether
Good point.
on the opposite, where it's just, hey, we're just informing you and answering your questions so you understand that, and it's quick and done, and it makes a lot more sense.
And take this for what it's worth, because we respect what you brought to us, we respect you as developers and as citizen people. And so the only reason I wanted to kind of get this last part of this meeting is just so that you know that what we're trying to do is what we feel is the best way to proceed.
Yeah.
So I hope you take it as that, not as anything else, because that's how it's meant.
Yeah.
So,
How do you guys feel the best way is to get word out, if they do decide to not do the hearing next week, to get word out that it's canceled? We did send out the notices, everyone within 500. feet
Notice
has
it,
been
yeah.
notified.
and I know that some postcards came, but
Is there another, well, I mean, we can
I
always
think
throw out
we'd
more
have to send
postcards.
it out.
Send it to.
More postcards.
We'd have to
Well,
send postcards.
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
I don't think you can,
It's
I think
canceled.
isn't there a law yet?
And maybe what we could, oh, sorry.
Isn't there a law that you have to have your notifications out by certain?
There is, that's why we actually already sent them out. So if we do cancel, we can send out more notifications to cancel the meeting. We can do that. It's just, we wouldn't be able to have the meeting if we hadn't sent the notices out in time.
I heard something that might go well for everybody. It's where it's just like a meeting that we're having in there. It's just the first part of it. And then just go on to the next session with it. And by, between that, those two Tuesdays, everybody should be on the same page.
It's kind of my thought as well. I'm a little concerned that we don't have all three. We didn't have them all through the whole.
Cause I see
conversation.
this seat over here
Yeah.
open, and I know Brent's gonna have about 1,800. Sarah's gonna come up with stuff you've never dreamed of.
School, the chance to review her stuff that she sent.
Not-
Oh, is that a?
I don't know how, I just really could have looked at it.
Well, I think the point is, in my mind, if we had everybody here tonight, be an easier decision for me to say, maybe we could go ahead.
Yeah. I
But
agree.
sometimes I hate feeding the chicken. By somebody who isn't here tonight, says a word that starts a fire in the public. And it's something that could have been handled here in 30 seconds.
Sure.
And I'm real sensitive to that with the public, especially these big projects.
Yeah.
I just think that it'll help it out.
The more prepared we are, the better the meeting will go. And to be honest, I think even if those three were here, there would have been enough of additional questions that we wouldn't have finished tonight. So I don't want you to feel like you're punished because they weren't able to be here either.
No,
That's not fair.
no.
I think,
You
I think
have
we'd
a
still
good
be
vote,
talking,
yeah.
we'd be like, okay, we're gonna have to continue this on, or just vote on it with, I'm comfortable with it, whatever it may be, so. I don't think that that hurt you in any way, honestly.
Planning Commissioner, would you guys feel comfortable? So we're having the hearing, making no decision. It's basically you're having the hearing, you're receiving the information. After the hearing, you can respond back to the questions or comments or whatever, and then you just close the meeting.
I personally don't like that because the community comes here and they're like, well, that was anticlimactic, like, what were we here for? Like, we didn't get no decision, what, you're still talking about this, like, what's gonna happen? I feel like it's kind of a waste of their time.
Okay.
I mean,
It's
I think
one
it's the
way-
same thing that happens when you table something,
Yeah,
but tabling it. The
At least-
community, it looks bad for them because the community is like, oh, there's something wrong, or we might have some hope, or whatever it is that they're doing, whatever they're thinking.
Yeah.
Can be misconstrued to something else, so.
I know through other
Time
systems.
sensitive is this to you guys?
I think all the time.
I mean, you only been
Yeah.
messing with it for.
I mean, we, it's very time sensitive, but we want to respect this process and you guys don't want to. You can feel, you guys don't get feel comfortable if you're up there.
Well, I mean, it's not even uncomfortable, it's that I wanna be, I wanna present or represent the whole thing.
So if we don't do it next week, what, let's just talk dates.
June.
Charlie, do we have any work session items for the Ogden Valley in June? So we could do a work session on June
It
3rd.
depends on what John Lewis wants, but I kind of think we don't need to do any more work sessions up there.
Yeah, just keep them down here.
Mhm.
So if we did a work session on June 3rd, but the problem is we could run into the same issue on June 10th, because we have to notice it before the June 3rd meeting for June 10th.
Are we
So
going to do a work session next week? Do we wanna talk about some, after, if you
could.
guys have the ability to have it after your meeting?
the
If we
problem,
send out the postcards of cancellation.
yeah, if we send the postcards out for cancellation, then we probably won't have as many people, and then we could have a work session next week.
Oh.
You could get a feel, and then if we had to have another work session on the 3rd, then we could notice it for the 10th.
What else is on our
And
agenda?
do that.
I don't know, what's on the
You
agenda
know, Charlie, what's
Tuesday,
on the
you
agenda
guys know?
Tuesday?
I,
Besides this item?
yeah,
Maybe
I
gives
could
us
actually
some-
put up.
Extra time with Sarah and the people that weren't here tonight,
Oh,
kind of filter two
Well, I
full.
think
If you guys feel like
I know we talked about a few things that we did tweet, but.
Yeah, cause I think you get that done.
left.
Yeah. But it gives us some time with Sarah and Bren and
Because
Debbie.
technically my staff report's due right now. It's supposed to be coming out to you guys either today or tomorrow, and
ChatGPT.
still don't. I still haven't looked at all the information.
Yeah,
Well, and the problem we have too is we're gonna be at a conference
Oh,
tomorrow, Thursday and Friday.
I was planning on writing a staff report while I was listening with my other ear,
Getting your seat. Like, guys.
having my keyboard on fire, just typing so fast.
Somebody with a bucket, ready to put it out.
No, there's.
So right now, it looks like we've got one item contemplated for next week, May 13th, and that is design review. So,
So
yeah, if we
fairly
don't have
simple,
anything
right?
else on the agenda, we should know.
I'm wondering if we take a risk and we send out a cancellation and notice for a public hearing on the 10th.
Oh, cancellation
So then they know it's
rescheduled.
changed.
Yeah,
So instead of
It's been
cancellation, it's a
rescheduled.
rescheduled.
and then that way we don't have to send out another and pay for another.
I like it.
notice.
idea.
I
So
like
we
it.
just do.
Plus, it looks like we're
Cancellation.
organized and not just haphazardly doing it.
Yeah.
I like it, I like it.
Yeah.
Question, Jeff,
Yeah.
you talk to the community, where you at with them, okay? I just wonder whether, I know basically what it is, but I mean, is it immense or?
I haven't talked to him since my last open house. I don't know, I think there's people that, there's obviously people, I think there's people that don't understand what it is and are upset, and there's people that understand what it is and are upset, and I feel like it, but I do think there's been there's been quite a few people who we've talked to that have you know, kind of make the Lane McFarland comment and I don't want change, but if it's gonna change, I'd rather have this than something.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying, I don't want change, but I also don't. control
I
my
think that's
property."
big in the community, because he stands to be changed the most.
Well, a lot of it too is just. Early on, a ton of misinformation gets spread. So when we held our open houses, a lot of people came in fired up because of misinformation, and as we actually told them what was happening and. A lot of that.
Thought we were gonna do something to
But I think, you know, the people that like this or hear it, they will get on shoved to that. As you do.
You know, the feedback I got on some of those, I never went over.
Possible to do a work session.
Even though they were happy, they were.
That's what they just planned. They're gonna
I thought that was.
unschedule it.
No, I mean,
But you need to
Tuesday.
say
They feel like,
Tuesday,
that,
do
you know, you're through.
Do a regular meeting at
Next week.
6. Yeah. Meeting at 4:30, we'll give them an hour.
We noticed the meeting for 5 o'clock.
Wow.
No, it doesn't mean that we can't redo the agenda and punt it to 6.
I don't know if it would be enough time, but I would be willing, if you feel like you could get your stuff between you two figured out. I would come in. I don't know if everybody else will be able to, but I'd be able to come in earlier. I'd suggest we come in earlier, so start at 4:30, start at 3:30 and do a work session, then go in there.
I mean, I think we're pretty dang close, like the things we have to amend are pretty minor, and you'll see in the thing we sent today, I mean, we accept a ton of stuff.
You've worn us down.
Yeah, we're.
And any help with Sarah's
Be my-
email too, that maybe even we could email her back or respond or,
Did you get a copy of?
no, I did not, but that would help expedite her. Perfect, thank you.
Bowling?
He gave me a copy. But we'll, at least we're aware.
Yeah, we're down here at 3:30 for a work session. What's
I mean,
your
I don't-
schedule looking like at 3:30 next week?
3:30 on.
Next Tuesday, like if we get a work session before, is that enough time for you to read through
I
it?
got one scheduled.
He said he doesn't have a real job, come on.
I'm gonna go back to the same thing I said before. I think it deserves and needs to have a work session. Not a work session before a meeting and not a work session after a meeting. I think it
It's
needs,
on.
that's my opinion. My opinion.
So
So
you're saying, do the reschedule for next month, and then we'll have a work session.
work session, a meeting.
The first of June.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, that's how I feel, but it's, you know, ultimately, it's not my decision, but that's how I feel.
I think it was, next week would be helpful if the other 3 years, we were just to make sure we were capturing everything before June 3rd, so June 3rd is like, hey, we've addressed all everyone's comments.
And then the
Here's what
final,
we did,
yeah.
are we good?
Yes.
Andrew, are you,
Work session after the meeting next week, is that what we're talking about? But
If we
Yeah.
only have one
That was my
item, it
question.
could go quick, so we could get that item
if we take the
approved,
hearing off,
hop in here, be in there 15 minutes, get in
come back
here,
here.
and be here for an hour.
I mean, I think it's gonna be, unless
Pretty
they're-
quick.
I think
Yeah.
it's really like, we address this, we address this, we address this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm all for that, that's fine.
Yeah.
That'd be fine, yeah.
Okay.
If we don't have to deal with a public hearing, yeah, it's probably
Yeah.
very feasible.
Well, we'll send out the cancellation and the reschedule for the 10th. Are you okay with that, Chair?
With what?
The cancellation of the hearing next week and then rescheduling it in that same notice, that postcard for the 10th of June,
For the 10th of June for the hearing.
for the hearing.
Right, yeah.
And are you guys?
Yeah, are you guys okay with that?
I think it gives us our best effort next week and then a
Yeah, I
whole
don't wanna- I don't
extra
wanna-
work session.
I
Yeah.
don't want you guys to feel.
Well, like I say, the more informed we are, the better we can handle the public.
Because my gut feel is they may not be totally fine with, get everyone here, they may not be totally fine with it
Right.
next week, but at least it gives us June 3rd
In case.
to
Mhm.
address those issues,
Right.
so we can clean things up to be,
Ready
know,
for this.
not take a polished turd on the 10th, but take something nice and polished.
it must be after hours. I've never heard him talk like that.
Goggles are on.
You know, ultimately, it's up to you.
I think, you know, good. We really appreciate your time. I know we've been
Yeah.
taking a lot of your time. Andrew, we'd love to keep coming.
Yeah, I'm telling you, just keep coming. In fact, just why don't you move over here on this side? I'll find my way out that way. Anyway, is there anything else? We're gonna adjourn this thing. We done?
Done.
No, thank you, guys.
All right, kill the thing so that the party can
I
begin.
don't know how to kill it, but.
Hey, did we talk about a requirement that you guys have to live in the development?
Oh,
I
I thought you meant in this office. I'm like, yeah, we talked about that.